My name is Alice, and I'm 28 years old. I work with kids. I recently got engaged to my boyfriend Tom. This is my first time visiting his parents' house. Tom went to a really good university and has a cool job at a big company. He's super smart and everyone respects him at work. I've always looked up to him. His dad seems happy about us getting married and even mentioned how they've never had a daughter and his wife will be excited. But I noticed that Tom's mom, who was sitting next to him, didn't seem too happy. It's been bothering me. She looked like she was mad, her face all scrunched up. Then out of nowhere, she asks, "I heard you didn't finish high school, is that true? Our Tom is top-notch, graduated from a big-shot university. Do you really think I'd be okay with him marrying someone like you?" Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Mom, that's really uncalled for. You're being mean to Alice," I said, defending my fiancé. "Yeah, Mom, what matters is how we feel about each other," Tom chimed in. Both Tom and his dad had my back, but it only seemed to make her angrier. Isn't it normal for a mom to care about who her son is marrying? Kids take after their moms, right? "I want the best for my family," she argued, not backing down. It seemed like she wasn't going to accept me, a high school dropout, because she wanted the best for her kids. Some people really care about what degrees you have, and parents often value education a lot. It felt really disheartening to be judged just because I didn't finish high school. But there's more to my story. I didn't drop out for no reason. After my dad died in a car crash, my mom struggled to take care of me and my twin sister, Emma. I had to step up and start working after middle school to help out. Now, I'm going to night school to get my diploma. I'm also saving up money, and I might even go to college someday. Tom is totally on board with this plan and has offered to pitch in for my college expenses. He understands where I'm coming from, and he's always been supportive. It's one of the reasons I fell for him. But it seems like my future mother-in-law isn't too happy about it. Tom doesn't have any siblings, so we'll be moving in with his parents eventually. I'm a bit anxious about how that's going to work out. A while later, I moved into their house with only a month left until our wedding. As the big day got closer, I had to make frequent trips to the venue for final checks and arrange hotels for our out-of-town guests. Between work, school, and wedding planning, I was swamped. But my mother-in-law didn't seem too happy with how I was handling things. Today, as I was putting on makeup to go to the venue, she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what are you wearing?" She couldn't help commenting on my outfit. "I'm getting ready to go to the venue, so I wanted to look nice," I explained. Whether she was unhappy with me dressing up for the occasion or just looking for an excuse to criticize me, I couldn't tell. You said you're going to the venue, but you're dressed like that just to catch some attention, aren't you? You should be more careful," she remarked. She just assumed I was meeting up with a guy instead of going to the venue. I was stunned. I assured her I was meeting Tom at the venue and suggested she ask him if she had doubts. But she wouldn't listen and insisted I was meeting someone else. Then, out of nowhere, she messed up my carefully styled hair. "What are you doing, Mom? I spent ages on my hair. Now it's ruined," I protested. With my hair all messy, I couldn't leave like that, so I had to fix it. But instead of apologizing, she said, "Don't bother fixing it. This messy look suits a dropout like you. You should wear it like this for the wedding." I was already running late, so I quickly fixed my hair and headed to the venue, where Tom was waiting. He noticed something was off with me, but I didn't want to bring up what happened with his mom before discussing the ceremony, so I kept quiet about what happened with Tom for now. Then, as the wedding day drew closer, my mother-in-law surprised us with a suggestion. "Hey, doesn't Alice's mom live far away? It must be hard for her to come and stay in a hotel. Why not have her stay with us?" Tom and I were taken aback by her sudden offer. It seemed like a good idea to save money on hotel bills and help our families bond. Tom thought I should talk to my mom about it, so I did. My mom was thrilled with the idea, and we decided to bring my twin sister, Emma, along too. At first, I thought my mother-in-law was being kind, but I had no idea what she would do next. The day before the wedding, my mom and sister arrived to stay at my in-laws' house. Seeing my mom and sister, who I hadn't seen in ages, brought me so much joy. My bond with my sister is super tight, and we were thrilled to be together again. We decided to share a room for the night. Emma, who had a bit to drink, was out like a light as soon as she hit the pillow. "Once she's out, I chuckled to myself. Just as I was thinking of hitting the hay too, I heard the door creak open. Wondering who it could be, I heard a loud buzzing noise and the sound of hair being shaved. "Now you won't be showing up at the ceremony tomorrow, will you? No need for hair on a dropout like you," my mother-in-law said. I was stunned. I quickly flipped on the lights and exclaimed, "Mother-in-law, what on earth are you doing?" The person in the bed suddenly sat up, surprising us both. "Huh? Mother-in-law, you've got the wrong person. I'm Alice," I clarified, realizing she mistook me for Emma. "I'm sorry, Mom, but it's not my hair. Emma and I are twins, and we look really similar," I clarified. "But it wasn't me who got her hair shaved. It was my sister, Emma." "What? No way. Why didn't it happen to Alice?" My mother-in-law was clearly shocked, but Emma, who had a bit too much to drink, was fast asleep. When she wakes up and sees her shaved head in the morning, she'll definitely be furious. Emma's got a fiery temper, so it's pretty obvious she'll be mad as heck. "What are you going to do now, Mom?" "I can't cover for you," I admitted, feeling guilty. Maybe my mother-in-law left the room looking pale. The next morning, when Emma saw herself in the mirror and realized she was bald, she was both shocked and furious. Our mom, who was there, couldn't hold back her tears, and Tom looked really upset. "This is awful. Who could have done such a thing?" So I spilled the beans about what happened the previous day in front of everyone. I wondered how my mother-in-law would react when she woke up, but she wasn't around. My father-in-law told me she had mentioned going for an early morning walk and hadn't come back yet. I started to worry that she might have left, so I decided to tell our family everything and began looking for her. About 30 minutes later, a relative called to say they found her at a nearby convenience store, and my father-in-law went to get her. When she got back home, seemingly unaware of the search, she immediately started making excuses. "I didn't do anything wrong. It's all Alice's fault. She used the clippers herself and shaved Emma's hair while she was sleeping," she claimed, much to my surprise. My mother-in-law was trying to blame me for everything, which left me completely stunned. I couldn't hold back and retorted, "That's absurd. I didn't do anything wrong. Weren't you the one who entered the room yesterday? It's unbelievable that you're still lying." But she was adamant about not admitting her mistake. Then my father-in-law seemed to recall something and went outside, returning with something in his hand. "Alice, could this be the clipper?" As I looked at the clipper he held, it was unmistakably the one my mother-in-law used to shave off Emma's hair last night. "That's it. That's the clipper." But where was it? It turned out that the clipper originally belonged to my father-in-law, who always cared about his appearance and carried grooming tools with him. When they checked the car, where he kept his grooming tools, they found it had been rummaged through and the clipper was missing. I always leave my car keys in the bedroom. "If there's brown hair in this clipper, then it's clear your mom is the culprit," he stated as he began to disassemble the clipper. The clipper contained unmistakable brown hair, clearly from Emma. She must have hurriedly left in the dark and didn't properly clean up the hair, my mother-in-law admitted, dropping to her knees as she noticed the evidence. "Alice, it's all your fault. You, a dropout with no money, tricked intelligent Tom. I wanted you out of Tom's life at any cost," she'd accused, leaving me feeling disgusted by her selfishness. Emma, who was most affected by her actions, was furious. "I don't care about your excuses. What are you going to do about this? I can't go to the wedding like this," she demanded. Upon hearing Emma's distress, my father-in-law made a quick call. Luckily, a friend who was a hairstylist agreed to come over immediately with a wig. While this would temporarily solve Emma's hair dilemma, we couldn't just ignore what my mother-in-law had done. 30 minutes later, father-in-law's friend arrived with the wig, and Emma's hair looked lovely again. Initially, father-in-law contemplated shaving my mother-in-law's hair like he did with Emma, but he decided it wouldn't provide a sense of closure. Instead, he chose to confront my mother-in-law's wrongdoing in front of everyone. Among the guests invited were the landlords to whom my mother-in-law's parents had been indebted for generations. They had a good rapport with father-in-law, and news of this incident would undoubtedly affect my mother-in-law's parents' living situation. You see, these landlords, who were close friends with my in-laws, had been giving them a discounted rent. However, upon learning about my mother-in-law's actions, the landlord, known for his integrity, would likely revert the rent to its original rate or even consider eviction. My mother-in-law's parents, who are financially strained, would then have no choice but to seek refuge with my mother-in-law. However, Tom had previously mentioned that my mother-in-law didn't have a good relationship with her parents and wouldn't be willing to assist them. For my mother-in-law, having her parents move in would be the start of a living nightmare. "Wait, please. I'll be in deep trouble if you do that." "I'm sorry, it was all my fault," she pleaded. "I made a terrible mistake, and I'm deeply sorry, Emma. I'll compensate you for the damage. Please forgive me," my mother-in-law pleaded, repeatedly apologizing as she pressed her forehead against the floor. However, despite her apologies, Emma's hair couldn't magically grow back. After discussing it, we decided that my father-in-law and Tom would disclose my mother-in-law's actions. Emma had already agreed to this. Initially, my mother-in-law refused to attend the wedding and attempted to flee, but Emma and Tom prevented her from escaping. When we arrived at the venue, relatives who had been informed of the situation through messages approached us, looking extremely concerned. In front of our relatives, we exposed my mother-in-law's wrongdoing, and Emma bravely removed her wig to reveal her bald head. Everyone was shocked by Emma's appearance, especially the women, who expressed disbelief. For a woman, hair is often considered vital, so the sudden loss due to shaving was particularly distressing. Some people couldn't help but shed tears as they thought of Emma's ordeal. As expected, the landlord confronted my mother-in-law, asking if the accusations were true. Initially, she tried to deny it, but under pressure from my father-in-law, she eventually admitted her wrongdoing. The landlord, visibly angry, faced criticism from the women present as well. Throughout the ceremony, my usually spirited mother-in-law remained downcast, a stark contrast to her usual self. Despite this, the wedding proceeded smoothly, and we were blessed by the well wishes of many attendees. However, it became clear that we could no longer reside with my mother-in-law in that house. Therefore, we made the decision to move into our own apartment and start our life as a couple. Although my mother-in-law panicked at the thought of us leaving, pleading with us not to go, we knew we couldn't continue living with her. My father-in-law shared the same sentiment. He informed my mother-in-law that he intended to divorce her and asked her to vacate the premises. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law turned pale and clung to him, begging for reconsideration. She expressed concerns about where she would live, given her strained relationship with her own parents. She appeared visibly distressed, as if on the verge of collapsing. However, despite her pleas, we prioritized Emma's well-being. The fact that my own hair had been shaved off while I slept, mistaken for Emma, was a jarring realization. Despite my mother-in-law's persistent attempts to persuade us otherwise, my father-in-law contacted her parents and she reluctantly agreed to leave the house. Currently, my mother-in-law is residing with her estranged parents, where she appears to be tending to their needs. However, it seems her parents possess challenging personalities and my mother-in-law is feeling overwhelmed by their demands. Despite reaching out to us multiple times, expressing her desire for a fresh start, we have no intention of reconciling with her, so we've chosen to block her calls. Presently, my husband and I are enjoying a happy life alongside my father-in-law in his home. Recognizing that the house was quite outdated, we embarked on a renovation project together. My father-in-law constructed his dream study, my husband created a space to showcase his model figures, and I focused on installing a modern, state-of-the-art kitchen. Naturally, we also prepared a room for our future child, and now the three of us are residing comfortably. Emma's hair, which was shaved during the ordeal, has since grown into a stylish short haircut, receiving praise from her friends as a positive transformation. She often jokes about the incident with her friends, which stirs up conflicting emotions for me. Nonetheless, Emma occasionally visits our family home for sleepovers, which I eagerly anticipate. While challenges may arise in the future, I am confident that with our collective efforts, we can overcome them together.
You're only expected to live for 6 more months. Stop wasting money. Today should be your last day of treatment. The words that came from Simon, my supposed husband, hit me like a death sentence, even with my daughter, Melody, standing right there. Simon spoke with such cruelty. He knew what ending my treatment meant. Yet he said it so casually. He talked as if it was just another way to cut household expenses. I couldn't process what he said fast enough, let alone think of a response. His words were so sudden, I couldn't tell if he was serious or joking. Even if it was a joke, it was a terrible one. As I tried to decide whether to take it seriously and react calmly, or treat it as a cruel joke and get slightly angry, Simon continued. I checked your insurance. It's a pretty large sum, huh? He must have looked into the insurance I told him about the other day. I had taken out a substantial policy to leave something for Melody. If you stay alive, that money will take forever to get to us. And while you're alive, your treatments cost a fortune. Simon waved the insurance contract in front of me as I stood there, stunned. Aren't you ashamed? You're just sitting there, doing nothing, while it all costs so much. That was beyond cruel. It was in that moment that I realized the dream of rebuilding my family I had just a month ago was now impossible. There was no way I could ever truly connect with Simon. What made it even worse was that he said this in front of Melody. Every time Simon spat out his harsh words, Melody's face grew darker. Simon was no longer her dad. In Melody's eyes, she had lost her father twice. Ashamed of what? Getting treatment when you're sick. That's basic common sense. Come on, compare it to the insurance payout. Would you rather waste money staying alive, or stop treatment so the family gets the insurance sooner? What's more responsible? My cousin, Molly, who was standing nearby, placed her hand on Melody's shoulder and glared at Simon. Simon, what exactly are you trying to say here? Why did you even come to the hospital? Molly had been taking care of Melody without knowing all the details, but even she had reached her limit. Her words, meant to call out Simon's behavior, only seemed to fuel his anger. I'm saying it's better if she just dies sooner so we don't waste the money and can get the insurance faster. As Simon said that, I found myself thinking of Melody's real dad, my ex-husband. When I found out my ex-husband had passed away, I was devastated. My heart felt like it was breaking. But Simon didn't seem to share that kind of emotion. It was clear now he'd choose money over me without hesitation. The tears that had been on the verge of falling earlier now felt distant. I was cold inside. There was no saving my relationship with Simon anymore. What hurt the most was letting Melody witness all of this. This man had no place in Melody's life. Even if I were to die, there was no way I could leave her with him. I wanted to say something, to fight back. But Melody spoke up first. Dad, you're the one who's going to die first. My name is Claudia. I'm the owner of a diner that my dad used to run before he passed away. I have one daughter. Her name is Melody. She's 10 years old now, and while she has some rather mature tastes for her age, she's a responsible kid. In my diner, we have many regular customers who've been coming for years, and I often chat with those who sit at the counter. It was a few years after my ex-husband passed away when I first met Simon, one of those regular customers. At the time, I was 30, and Simon was 28, 2 years younger than me. Simon would come in almost every day, and always sat at the counter, striking up light-hearted conversations with me. I love the vibe of your diner, Claudia. The food, the coffee, it's all just my kind of place. Thank you. My dad was really strict about how I made coffee. He taught me well. Simon worked in sales, and he was considerate enough to avoid coming during the diner's busiest times, so we could chat leisurely. As we talked more, we started sharing personal stories, and I eventually told him about my ex-husband's passing. That's when Simon got serious. I've always felt bad about your ex-husband, but, Claudia, would you consider dating me, with marriage in mind? What? I was so shocked I nearly dropped the dish I was wiping, but I managed to catch it in time. Looking at Simon's face, I could tell he was serious. I tried to calm down, but I could feel my face heating up. Sure, I enjoyed our conversations. They flowed naturally, and I found myself missing him when he left after paying the check, but I hadn't even considered dating again after losing my ex-husband. So the idea of starting a relationship with Simon had never crossed my mind. As I stood there speechless, Simon got up from his seat at the counter and gently placed his hand over mine. "I'll take care of both you and Melody." That's when he won me over, and we started dating. Shortly after we began our relationship, I introduced Simon to Melody. She had seen him around the diner a few times before, so she was somewhat familiar with him. Being the salesman that he was, Simon skillfully brought up topics that intrigued Melody's age group, and the two quickly bonded. Simon was already well liked by the regular customers, and soon after we started dating, he told them about it. Though it was a bit embarrassing, the regulars seemed to trust him and strongly encouraged me not to let him go. About a year into our relationship, Simon proposed. Since we had already talked about marriage from the start, I had been thinking about it while we were dating. Some of the regulars had known my dad, and they'd say things like, "Your dad would have approved of him." Melody was also in favor of the marriage, and even said she wanted a dad like Simon. That gave me the final push to say yes. After we got married, Simon moved into the house I had lived in with Melody. The house was one my ex-husband had bought, located near the diner. "Mom, can I help with anything?" Melody walked into the kitchen, looking a little concerned, as I was preparing dinner. "Thanks, honey. I'm fine. Your dad will be home soon, so make sure you finish your homework." "I already finished it." "Really? Well, why don't you go ahead and take a shower?" "Will do." Shortly after Melody went to take her shower, Simon came home. When I heard the doorbell, I unlocked the door to greet him. "Welcome home." Hey, because of his job, Simon's work hours were unpredictable. Sometimes, he'd even get home before I did. Today, it seemed he had to stay late at work. He handed me his briefcase, and we walked into the living room together. "Where's Melody?" "She just went to take a shower." When I said that, Simon suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Wait, she's taking a shower before me." He looked at me like he couldn't believe it. I hadn't thought it was a big deal, so I didn't know how to respond, and stayed silent. Simon sighed. "Whatever. Let's just eat first. Dinner will be ready soon." "What? It's not done yet." "How long will it take?" "It'll be ready by the time Melody gets out of the shower." When I said that, Simon's expression turned even more surprised. "Wait, so everything revolves around Melody now?" "No, it's just the timing. It worked out that way. But that timing should be set around your husband, don't you think?" I didn't quite understand what Simon was getting at, so I stood there confused as he started speaking in an accusatory tone. "I come home, and yet I can't shower. There's no dinner. Normally, you'd have these things ready for your husband when he gets home, right? Well, neither of those can happen immediately. But Melody's almost done in the shower, and dinner won't take much longer. See, that's proof you're not planning around me." It seemed like Simon was upset that I didn't prioritize him. That wasn't my intention at all. I was just trying to be efficient by having Melody shower first. But for Simon, that was unacceptable. What should I say? Should I apologize or correct him? While I was still deciding, Melody came out of the shower. "Oh, Dad, welcome home." "Yeah, I'm home. Why don't you take a shower before dinner? I'll have it ready by the time you're done." "All right." When I offered Simon the chance to shower first, he responded curtly and headed toward the bathroom. Melody, sensing the strange tension between us, asked if something was wrong, but I decided it wasn't worth discussing and brushed it off, telling her it was nothing. At that time, it was just a slight feeling of discomfort. But as Simon's demands grew, I began to see his true nature. He couldn't stand not being the center of attention. For example, when he came home, he wanted to choose between a shower or dinner. In the morning, he expected me to ask if he preferred toast or cereal. If it rained unexpectedly, he wanted me to pick him up. When we went shopping as a family, we had to start with men's clothing. He also wanted the final say on where we ate out. Each request wasn't a huge deal on its own, but the problem was that Simon never wanted to make any concessions for Melody. He wasn't mean to her, but he just did not prioritize her. Once, on a rainy day, both Simon and Melody needed to be picked up from different locations. I suggested picking up Melody first because it made more sense based on the route. Simon's response was unforgettable. "You and Melody both need to prioritize me. She's out playing, isn't she? I'm the one working, so I should come first." Even though we were both caught in the rain, Simon couldn't fathom giving Melody priority. Melody wasn't in a place where she would get wet, so I didn't worry about her catching a cold. She was with her friends, so she wasn't lonely either. Still, Simon's words left me feeling uneasy, if not outright disgusted. I knew there was a difference between how much I valued Melody and how much Simon did. But Simon's point was clear. He wanted to be prioritized over Melody. I married Simon thinking he would care for Melody. But had there ever been a time when he put her before himself? "All right, I'll come get you first. Thanks." Even though I wanted to talk it over with him, this wasn't the time to have that conversation. So I decided to pick him up first. That was about 6 months into our married life. One evening, Simon told me he wanted to talk about something after Melody had gone to bed. "Hey, don't you think it's time to close the diner?" What Simon wanted to discuss was me giving up running the diner. His sudden suggestion left me speechless. "You should be spending more time with Melody. And the housework is slipping too, isn't it?" "I've never asked you for help with housework, Simon. I do everything myself." "True, but if you close the diner, you could spend more time on housework." "Right, well I guess, but..." Simon knew that the diner was something I inherited from my dad. And business wasn't bad at all. It wasn't like I was running a big chain cafe. With late hours I usually got home before Simon. And it struck me as odd that the same Simon who always demanded to be prioritized was now using Melody as the reason I should quit. Was this really about Melody? "Sorry, but I can't make a decision like that right now. I need to think about it." Even if I intended to turn down Simon's suggestion, I knew this wasn't the time to give an answer. So I suggested we put the decision on hold for now. Simon seemed to accept that it wasn't something I could decide right away. He simply said, "All right," and headed to the bedroom. After that, I continued working while being even more diligent with the housework. I didn't want anyone, especially Simon, to accuse me of neglecting things just because I had a job. And for over a month after our conversation, Simon didn't bring up the idea of me quitting the diner again. About 2 months later, I was still feeling unwell, so I went to a local clinic. At first, they told me it was just fatigue, as my condition showed no signs of improvement and was instead worsening. I continued visiting the clinic. Eventually, the doctor suggested that I should go to a larger hospital and gave me a referral. I went to the larger hospital and spent an entire day undergoing various tests on my body. A few days later, when I returned for my scheduled follow-up, I was given the news. I had 6 months left to live. That was the lifespan the doctor gave me. After discussing treatment options and hospitalization plans, I returned home. I didn't want to worry Melody, so I waited until she had gone to bed before talking to Simon in the living room. Simon, however, seemed to think I had finally decided to close the diner. "So you finally made up your mind Took you long enough. So when's the last day? Now wasn't the time to entertain Simon's wishes. I began to explain calmly. I haven't been feeling well recently, so I went to a larger hospital. A larger hospital? Don't you think that's a bit overboard? No, it's serious. They've given me 6 months to live. 6 months left. Simon seemed shocked and fell silent. I continued. I'll need to be in the hospital for treatment soon. So I need to ask you to take care of Melody while I'm away. I didn't know how long I would be hospitalized. I understood that it would be hard for Simon to juggle his job and caring for Melody. But Melody was a responsible child, and I hadn't had too much trouble managing her day-to-day needs. Still, she was in 6th grade and needed an adult support, and I wanted Simon to be that support as her dad. Simon thought for a moment, then sighed dramatically and gave me a look of frustration. Before we talk about the future, aren't you going to apologize first? What? Apologize? Yeah, apologize. I was completely confused by this unexpected demand and asked him what he meant. Simon snickered. Your illness is punishment for working too much and neglecting me. Neglecting you? Punishment? Yeah, I told you to quit the diner, and you didn't, right? How does not quitting mean I neglected you? No matter how much I tried to understand, I couldn't make sense of Simon's reasoning. This kind of conversation disconnect wasn't something I had noticed before we got married. A wife's job is to support her husband, right? You slacked off on that, so now you're paying the price. My illness has nothing to do with your complaints. It's all your own fault. Just don't make me deal with any of it. Deal with it. Was he talking about taking care of Melody? Either way, I understood one thing clearly: Simon had no intention of supporting us. How many days will you be in the hospital? And what am I supposed to do about meals while you're gone? The duration isn't set yet. It won't just be a few days, though. As for meals, you and Melody will have to manage on your own. What? You're kidding, right? After all the neglect I put up with, now you expect me to clean up your mess, too. Feeling unwell, I started to struggle to breathe. Here I was, trying to have a conversation with my husband, my supposed partner, and I couldn't understand why I was being attacked like this. What I did understand was that he wasn't going to help me through this. Fine, I'll ask Molly to take care of Melody. You can figure out your own meals. Well, isn't that great? And about the hospital admission. Didn't I tell you? Don't involve me in any of this. Simon completely refused to be involved in my hospitalization. I didn't have the strength to argue, and all I wanted was to escape the suffocating atmosphere. So I decided not to ask Simon for anything else. That same day, I contacted my cousin, Molly, and she readily agreed to take care of Melody. Molly and I had always been close, and she lived within walking distance, so she and Melody saw each other often. Rather than move in with us, which would be difficult for both of us, Molly offered to come by daily to cook and help with housework. I felt relieved knowing Melody would be cared for. As for the diner, I decided to close it temporarily rather than shutting it down permanently. Even though I had been given 6 months to live, I wanted to keep my place to return to. On the day of my hospitalization, Melody and Molly accompanied me to the hospital and helped me with my things. Simon, however, did nothing to assist with my admission. In fact, right up until the day I went in, he continued expecting me to handle the housework as usual. A few days after my hospitalization, Simon came to visit for the first time. You look pretty healthy, all things considered. Is something wrong? His words reminded me of our earlier conversation. It didn't feel like he was concerned about me. I couldn't help but wonder if there was another reason he had come. I found myself questioning his true intentions. I'm just here to make sure everything's in order, just in case. In order? Yo. How much do you have saved up? I hadn't expected him to visit out of concern, but the mention of money still caught me off guard. I was lying in a hospital bed, and the first thing he asked me about was our savings. Still, I felt calmer than I had during our last conversation. Being in the hospital had given me time to think, to reflect on the future with Simon and Melody. Melody looked up to Simon as her real dad, and Simon could be a fun dad at times. I wanted to listen to him and perhaps make amends. I'm not sure how much we've saved exactly. I haven't touched the inheritance from my ex-husband, though, so there's that. What about insurance? Simon seemed eager to know. I tried to recall my current condition and the details of the insurance policy I had. I have a policy for Melody. I think it covers this hospitalization. Just hospitalization. What about if you die? What? I couldn't believe how casually he brought up my death. It was as if he were talking about a celebrity rumor, not my life. Simon understood the possibility of my death, but didn't seem too concerned. Why are you asking me this now? I told you. It's just to be prepared. I don't want to be scrambling later if something happens. But we don't need to talk about my death right now, I said, feeling defeated. And Simon sighed. Melody wouldn't understand all this. I need to be the one who knows. It's for Melody's sake. For Melody. Exactly. I suppose if I were to die and Simon didn't know about the insurance, it could go to waste. Yes, I have insurance. Melody is the beneficiary, and it covers this illness too. Simon's expression brightened at this. Good, I'll be really busy with work, so I won't be able to visit again for a while. Hang in there. Wait, what? Simon left abruptly. The room, once filled with his presence, fell into a cold, empty silence. True to his word, Simon didn't visit again. Melody, on the other hand, came to see me 2 or 3 times a week with Molly. I looked forward to hearing about her school days and how things were going at home. Are you going to bed on time? Not staying up late watching all those shows, are you? I'm watching a little, but I'm getting enough sleep. Really? Melody had a somewhat mature hobby, watching drama series. However, she's not interested in romantic dramas. She prefers long mystery series. She also enjoys mystery novels, so if I don't keep an eye on her, she sometimes stays up late reading. Melody, how are things with Dad? I had been wondering about Simon's behavior before I was hospitalized. Molly was taking care of things at home, so I assumed everything was fine. Simon had been cold towards me, but surely he was still being a dad to Melody. Dad's no good. I wasn't sure what she meant by that. I glanced over at Molly, who wore a slightly troubled expression. Melody, could you go to the convenience store and get Mom a drink? Sure, no problem. I handed her some money. Get yourself a treat, too. Yay, I'll be right back. After Melody left, it was just Molly and me. What's going on? When I asked, Molly began to speak. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I chose to trust Molly and Melody. It had been a month since Simon's first and last visit. He hadn't reached out at all. I'd occasionally send him messages or call, but he never responded. Today, Melody and Molly had come to visit me. I was feeling better and had been enjoying a nice, long chat with Melody when suddenly, the door to my hospital room opened. Melody's here too. Simon walked in. Melody hadn't mentioned that Simon would be coming today, so it seemed to be a coincidence. Simon, it's been a while. Thanks for coming. I greeted him, but Simon just looked at me. Lying in the bed, connected to all sorts of medical equipment, I couldn't believe the words that came out of his mouth. This is what I call a waste of money. What? Simon mumbled quietly. I barely heard him, But Molly did. She immediately placed her hands over Melody's ears. Don't waste money when you've only got 6 months left. You should stop the treatment today. The words from Simon, my husband, hit me like a death sentence, even with Melody standing right there. Simon showed no mercy. If Molly had not covered Melody's ears, she would have heard every word. Simon knew what stopping treatment meant, yet he said it with such a casual tone. It was as if he was talking about cutting down household expenses. I couldn't process what he said fast enough, and I had no idea how to respond. It was so sudden I couldn't tell if he was serious or joking. Even if it was a joke, it was terrible. As I considered whether to take him seriously and respond calmly, or treat it as a cruel joke, Simon continued. I checked your insurance. You've got quite the policy, don't you? He must have looked into the insurance I had mentioned before. I had taken out a large policy for Melody's future. It doesn't make sense to wait until you're gone to get the money, especially when your treatment is costing so much. Simon waved the insurance contract in front of me as I stood there, stunned. You're not doing anything, and yet it's costing all this money. Aren't you ashamed? Those words cut deeper than any before. It became clear to me that the hope I had just last month of rebuilding our family was now impossible. There was no way I could ever truly understand Simon. What hurt more than the insult was the fact that he said it in front of Melody. Every time Simon hurled his cruel words, Melody's expression darkened. Simon wasn't her dad anymore. Melody had lost her dad twice now. Ashamed of what? Getting treatment when you're sick. That's the most basic thing there is. Come on, think about it. What makes more sense, spending money to extend your life or stopping treatment? Oh, the insurance comes in sooner. Which is more responsible for the family? Molly, standing beside Melody, placed her hand on Melody's shoulder and glared at Simon. Simon, stop. Claudia is fighting for her life. Don't say another word. Just leave. Molly had been taking care of Melody without asking for any details, but even she couldn't take it anymore. Her words, meant to stop Simon, only seemed to ignite his anger further. That's exactly why we should stop wasting money and get the insurance payout sooner. As Simon said that, I couldn't help but think of my ex-husband, Melody's real dad. When I learned my ex-husband had passed away, I was devastated. My heart felt like it was shattering. But Simon didn't feel that way. He was willing to throw me away for money without a second thought. I had been on the verge of tears, but now I just felt cold. There was no way I could repair my relationship with Simon. What I couldn't forgive, though, was letting Melody see all of this. This man isn't needed for Melody's sake. Even if I'm going to die, he shouldn't be the one by Melody's side. I was about to speak up, but Melody spoke first. Dad, you will be the one to die first. Her words left not only me, but also Molly and Simon speechless. Melody continued. Socially, of course. Simon snapped back to reality, glaring at Melody with a face twisted in anger. What nonsense are you spouting, you brat? He kicked a chair across the room, breathing heavily, trying to intimidate her. I thought Melody would be scared, but when I looked at her, she was glaring right back at Simon, just as fiercely. I know what you did, Dad. You changed a beneficiary on the insurance policy, didn't you? What? Simon stammered at Melody's accusation. Claudia, this is all because you didn't raise her right. Now she's talking back like she knows something. Simon refused to acknowledge Melody's words, instead yelling at me. Simon, can't you just calm down and talk like an adult? Talk about what? You underestimated Melody. She saw you change the beneficiary right in front of her. Melody had caught Simon rummaging through the insurance papers and suspected something was wrong, so she kept an eye on him. Simon thought that because Melody was still young, she wouldn't understand what he was doing. That's why he blatantly filled out the beneficiary change forms right in front of her. At first, Melody didn't fully understand what Simon was doing, but because she enjoyed watching mystery dramas, she worried it might be related to something shady. After hearing about it from Melody, Molly searched for the insurance papers and discovered that Simon had forged my signature on a power of attorney form, changing the beneficiary to himself. The original beneficiary was supposed to be Melody, but Simon had gone behind my back to make sure he would receive the full payout. I had learned about the unauthorized change to the beneficiary a month ago when Molly told me. Even though part of me still wanted to believe in Simon, I knew he hadn't been acting like a dad to Melody while I was in the hospital. Melody had told me that Simon hadn't been coming home until late every night. A dad like that was useless to Melody. You do know it's wrong to change the beneficiary without permission, right? Well, I just thought it would be too much responsibility for Melody. Then why didn't you just ask me directly? Because you were sick. Simon was panicking. His words were coming out in broken phrases, and his breathing was becoming erratic. And besides, you don't have proof that I forged anything. Simon grasped at straws, desperately trying to defend himself. That's when Melody pulled out her phone and showed us a video she had recorded. In the video, Simon was sitting at the table, surrounded by papers, pen in hand. She had recorded him from behind, clearly capturing him filling out the forms. "Dad, did you bring work home?" In the video, Melody continued recording as she spoke to Simon. Simon barely glanced at her, seemingly unaware that he was being filmed. "No, this is paperwork your mom needs done. It looks really complicated." "You're amazing, Dad. How can you understand all these difficult forms?" "Of course I can. I'm an adult," Simon answered, clearly pleased with himself. He seemed to enjoy Melody's praise. "What's this paper you're writing on? I can't even read it." At the top of the paper, the words power of attorney were visible. "It's a power of attorney form." "What's that? Why are you handling Mom's paperwork? She's in the hospital and can't do it herself, so I'm helping out." Simon admitted to filling out the power of attorney. The video was damning. I turned to face Simon. His face, once filled with arrogance when he first entered the room, was now pale and anxious. "I don't think I ever mentioned it, Simon, but Molly is a lawyer." "What?" "She's already gathered this forged power of attorney, and the video we just saw is evidence of your fraudulent actions." Simon stepped back, retreating. He probably knew running wouldn't help, but it seemed like an instinctive response. As Melody slipped her phone back into her pocket, she glared at Simon. "Forging a power of attorney is a crime, and socially, you're done for, Simon." She didn't call him Dad anymore, just Simon. It was her way of saying she no longer considered him her father. Simon seemed to realize what was coming. His face grew even paler. When our eyes met, he reached out and placed his hand on mine. "You must have been surprised to see me suddenly, right? Today's just been a joke. A joke. I want to support the rest of your life, Claudia. Let's stick together as husband and wife." A joke. Telling me to always put him first. Telling me not to be a burden before I went into the hospital. Not helping with Melody. Changing the beneficiary on my insurance without permission. How much of all this does he think can be brushed off as a joke? Simon's words had caused me so much pain and heartache. Even today, if he hadn't tried to make me stop the treatment, I might not have confronted him about changing the insurance. And the fact that he didn't care about Melody, that's not a joke. It's the truth. Don't touch me. Do you think everything can be brushed off as a joke? Come on, don't be so angry, it'll shorten your life. It had been a while since I'd seen Simon smile. But this smile wasn't the one I used to know. It was tight, forced, almost groveling like a sycophant begging for something. As if he had learned to beg like a trained monkey. Simon, you know I tried contacting you several times, right? Ever since his last visit, I had tried to reach Simon many times. No returned calls, no replies to messages. That's because I wasn't avoiding you. Work was just so busy. It's fine. We're talking now, aren't we? We can talk now. What is it? Did you want to say goodbye or something? His disrespectful comments, like shorten your life and say your goodbyes, didn't even anger me. Trying to correct this man would be exhausting. I didn't want to waste any more energy or thought on him. The treatment's going quite well. Huh? What do you mean? Simon couldn't seem to comprehend what I was saying. I looked at him again and repeated myself. The treatment is working. I'm getting better. I'm not going to die as soon as they predicted. What? Simon's face showed obvious panic. No, but what about the money? If I'm not dying, you won't get any money. And the money was always meant for Melody. What? No payout? That's impossible. What do you mean? Simon's desperation for the insurance money was painfully clear. I still couldn't understand why he wanted so much money that he would forge my signature. A few days ago, Melody had found something in the trash at home. I handed it to Simon. Simon, you know what this is, right? Why do you have that? The item was a debt collection notice. The letter detailed a $30,000 debt. The contents of the debt collection notice included the date when the loan was taken out. That date was shortly after I had been hospitalized. Simon and I didn't share a bank account, and we didn't know each other's savings balances. But Simon had never seemed like someone who spent recklessly, so I didn't understand why he had accumulated so much debt. Melody had told me that Simon hadn't been coming home most nights since I'd been in the hospital. I could only assume he'd been spending his nights out. Still, I wanted to hear the truth from him. I didn't want to ask Melody to check Simon's phone. Melody, I'm really thirsty. Could you go get us all some drinks? I wanted to get Melody out of the room, so I asked her to run an errand. She hesitated, not wanting to leave. But after I asked again, she agreed. Melody, I'd love an iced latte from the cafe near the front desk on the first floor. Molly quickly suggested a cafe that was a bit farther away. She was helping me buy some time. Melody reluctantly agreed and left the room. Now, Simon, you can tell me the truth, can't you? Simon, realizing that the forged power of attorney had been exposed, seemed to have no energy left to hide anything. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his gaze was unfocused. As I kept staring at him, he finally resigned himself and began to speak. There's a girl in trouble. I've been helping her out financially. His vague response made me speak with a little more frustration. A girl in trouble? Who? Why would you take on debt to help her? Well, I mean, it's hard to explain. What's hard to explain? What's harder is the fact that you're in this much debt. Simon seemed to realize that he wouldn't be able to get away with being vague, so he took a deep breath. It's called sugar dating. Okay, I got caught up in that. Sugar dating. Hearing that, I felt a blood drain from my face. I was completely disgusted by Simon. I had thought he might be involved in something like a companion service. But the moment I heard sugar dating, I was relieved Melody wasn't in the room to hear this. Is the debt just from sugar dating? No gambling or anything. I don't gamble at all. It's just from the sugar dating. Simon said this proudly for some reason. How do you plan to pay it back? Even though he had changed the beneficiary on my insurance, that money would only be paid out if I died. The debt repayment deadline wasn't far off, and with the collection notice already arriving, it was likely too late. The insurance money was meant for Melody's future, not for paying off debts. When I asked Simon, puzzled, he shamelessly explained, "Well, your diner is on land you own, right?" I thought I could sell that. Sell the diner's land. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But Simon didn't correct himself. Instead, he just smiled foolishly. "Oh, you didn't catch that part yet." Simon said it with no shame. I was worried sick about what was happening with the diner. The anger inside me was building, knowing he was planning to sell off the business I had inherited from my dad. "Who do you think you are, making decisions like that?" "What?" Simon looked genuinely shocked. I had never spoken to him this strongly before. "How did you even plan to sell it?" "I've been handling it through the power of attorney." "But come on, even if you're recovering, you're not going to be able to run the place again, right?" This was a joke. I was undergoing treatment so I could return to work. "What's the status of the diner now?" "Nothing's been done yet, but someone's interested in buying it, and we're negotiating the price." "You think the sale price is enough to cover your debt? But why were you panicking if you weren't going to get the insurance money?" "Well, that's because..." Simon scratched his cheek with a nervous laugh. "I promised my sugar baby I'd buy her a condo. Selling the land alone wouldn't be enough for that." Simon showed no signs of remorse. And even if he did, I had no intention of ever forgiving him. I suppressed the urge to shout at him and spoke calmly. "It's really over now. You've gone so far as to touch the diner. Simon, I'm turning you over to the police, so be prepared for the consequences. Your life, as Melody said, is over." Simon made a sudden movement. Molly, watching closely, immediately opened the door to the room. "Someone, help, this man's going out of control." Molly's voice echoed down the hallway. Simon grabbed me by the collar, bringing his face close to mine, and shouting angrily, "You've been running your mouth while I've been playing nice. Who do you think you are, huh?" He sounded like a cheap mafia character in some low-budget TV show, and I had to fight the urge to laugh as I glared at him. "That's assault, by the way." "Shut up, you just had to drag out your treatment and ruin everything." At that moment, a few nurses, both men and women, rushed into the room. Simon grabbed me by the collar, looking like he was about to hit me, and the nurses quickly restrained him. "Hey, what do you think you're doing to a patient? Get out of here." "Claudia, are you okay?" The nurses split into two groups, some restraining Simon while others checked on me. "Let go of me. I'm her husband. Don't touch me." Simon struggled, but with two male nurses holding him down, his resistance was futile. He was eventually dragged out of the hospital room. As Simon was being escorted out, Melody returned with the drinks in her arms. I was relieved that Melody and I were safe, and I pulled her into a hug. "Thank you both. Because you were here with me, I was able to stand up to Simon." I expressed my deep gratitude to Melody and Molly. They were determined to see this through to the end. Afterward, the hospital called the police, and an investigation was conducted in my room. With Molly, my lawyer, present, everything with the police went smoothly. Simon was charged with assault and taken into custody, and his company was informed. He was also prohibited from contacting me or coming to the hospital until I was discharged. Molly, worried Simon might seek revenge on Melody, offered to take care of her at her house until I was released. Of course, the sale of the land was canceled. When we contacted the real estate agents Simon had been working with, they refused to proceed with the sale, not wanting to deal with such a fraudulent transaction. I also contacted the insurance company, and they sent a representative to the hospital. I explained about the forged power of attorney, and they restored Melody as the beneficiary, as it had always been. My treatment continued to progress well, and a month after Simon's last visit, I was able to be discharged from the hospital. The house was in my name, so while I was still hospitalized, Molly and the police were there to ensure Simon moved out. Now I'm proceeding with the divorce through family court without having to see Simon in person. Naturally, I'm also filing for compensation in the divorce. During my hospitalization, Simon was given a suspended sentence for forging the documents, leaving him with a criminal record. Because of this, he was fired from his job. Simon had been sending me one-sided messages, claiming he had quit sugar dating. It wasn't that he had quit, it was more likely that his partner had cut ties with him. No young girl would want to stick around for free with an old man. He was now a convicted felon with debt and no job, struggling to find work. Simon sent messages repeatedly, saying he wanted to reconcile, that he wanted to support me, but I knew it was just about getting help with his debt. I never replied, and after dragging his feet on signing the divorce papers for months, Simon finally signed, and our divorce was finalized. He finally seemed to understand it was truly over. I'm now fully recovered and running the diner again. My regular customers have returned, and the diner is back to the way it was before I ever met Simon. As for Melody, she turned our story with Simon into a novel and published it online. It became surprisingly popular and garnered a lot of attention. Melody has grown to love writing, and now she spends her time in a corner of the diner, reading books or writing more of her story at her own pace. As for me, I'm enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of my diner once again, cherishing every moment as I work happily each day.
For the past 20 years since we got married, I thought I had been doing my best for my husband Paul and my mother-in-law, Dorothy. But then, out of the blue, Paul told me, "Starting next month, I'm going to live with Mom and Angela," announcing his plans to move in with Dorothy and his sister Angela. To make matters worse, Dorothy insulted me by saying, "Parasites from outside the family should go back to their own homes." That was the moment I finally woke up. I said, "Understood. Then I'll leave." With those words, I left the house the next day. However, when furniture and appliances started being moved out one after another, and Paul and his family heard that I had moved into a new condominium reputed to be worth $1 million, they were furious and came storming over. My name is Linda, and I'm 48 years old. I work in the accounting department of an air conditioning company. I lived with Paul, who is 2 years younger than me, and my mother-in-law Dorothy. We have no children. Paul and I first met when he joined the large real estate development company where I worked. Initially, I watched from the sidelines as he was doted on by female colleagues and older male employees, thinking he was just a man of these times. But for some reason, Paul said to me, "Other accountants are kind of hard to approach, but you have a gentle aura, Linda." He started assigning most of his paperwork to me. However, whether he was naturally scatterbrained or just carefree, I couldn't tell, but even when I pointed out errors in his documents or last-minute submissions, he would quickly apologize, saying, "I'm really sorry." While I appreciated his willingness to apologize, the fact that he rarely corrected his behavior meant I often ended up working overtime because of him. It seemed clever, or rather sly, to keep up a cheerful facade, but each time I couldn't help feeling a bit troubled inside. Yet, whenever I appeared to struggle with the office supplies provided, he would bring me stationery he recommended, showing a thoughtfulness that always made me forgive him. In the end, I was being won over, just as he was, by taking care of him. Our relationship took a significant leap forward when I fell ill on the commuter train. Perhaps due to staying late at work during the busy season, I suddenly felt dizzy. Somehow, I managed to endure until I reached the station closest to our office, but then I slumped over on a bench on the platform, unable to move and fighting the nausea that was creeping up on me. Noticing my condition, Paul, despite my protests about getting his suit dirty, carried me to the station's medical room, following the station staff's instructions. Afterward, I took some medicine I had with me and lay down for a while. Eventually, the dizziness subsided, and I contacted the office again, only to be instructed by my boss to go home for the day. Moreover, Paul, who had stayed with me, was ordered to make sure I got home safely. Though I initially refused, I ended up letting him escort me home. The next day, I went to work as usual, apologized to my boss and colleagues, and then visited Paul in the sales department to explain the situation to his boss and apologize. "I really inconvenienced you, and I want to do something to make it up to you. How about this? Treat me to dinner this Friday. I'm short on cash right before payday." Paul's innocent request made me burst out laughing, and I agreed. While I intended it to be a one-time meal, he insisted. "Now that I've gotten my paycheck, let me treat you this time as a way of saying thanks." A reciprocation of thanks, and then another, somehow led to us being seen as a couple by those around us before we knew it. But when I rushed to deny the rumors, I found I was the only one in a panic. Paul, ever the laid-back one, said, "There's no need to deny it so desperately. I don't mind being thought of that way." Just like that, we came to be treated as a couple by everyone around us. And 2 years later, when I turned 28, "Maybe it's about time we got married. It would probably make everyone else feel more at ease," he suggested, and we got married. However, I had intended to keep working, but it was unexpected when Paul, who also worked at the same company, told me it was suffocating and asked me to quit. "Considering your age, shouldn't you focus on having children first?" Similarly to Dorothy, Paul also strongly suggested that I resign from my job. Moreover, while we had hoped to live in a condominium about 30 minutes away by train if we were both working, the conversation about living with Paul's parents came up. In fact, my father-in-law had passed away 10 years ago, and ever since my sister-in-law Angela, who is 4 years older than Paul, got married and moved out 3 years ago, Dorothy and Paul had been living alone together. Although I knew as the eldest son, Paul would eventually live with his parents, I wasn't keen on starting our marriage living with them. However, if Paul were to move out, Dorothy, being left alone, strongly opposed living separately. Convinced by the economic benefits of saving on rent, we started our married life living together. For a while after we got married, everything was peaceful. Dorothy was proud of Angela, who graduated from a prestigious university, landed a job at a major general trading company, and married an elite man from her workplace. Despite being the eldest son, Dorothy seemed to show little interest in Paul. Angela, who lived in a condominium about 30 minutes away by train from her parents' home, often begged Dorothy to help with household chores. "Mom, please come help. I'm too busy every day to handle all the housework." Dorothy, flattered by her beloved daughter's plea, didn't mind at all and regularly went to Angela's condominium, acting like a maid, cooking, cleaning, and doing laundry. However, there were times when Dorothy alone wasn't enough to handle everything, or when Angela took a vacation and they went out for afternoon tea at their favorite hotel, that I would also be called upon to help. But on regular days, Dorothy barely interfered with Paul and me, making our cohabitation more comfortable than I had anticipated. Given that, I thought helping out at Angela's place occasionally wasn't much of an issue. However, one day, Angela and Dorothy planned a one-night trip for rest and relaxation. During their absence, I was asked to tidy up Angela's house alone. Angela said it would be bad to inconvenience her husband while we're gone, so please take care of the cleaning, laundry, and prepare meals in advance. After sending Angela and Dorothy off and receiving the keys, I entered Angela's condominium and began doing the household chores as instructed. Cleaning, laundry, ironing, I went about my usual routine. But when it came time to store the prepared dishes in the fridge, make sure you chill his favorite brand of beer. He gets grumpy if it's not cold, I remembered being told. Checking the fridge, I found not a single bottle of the crucial beer. Only the mineral water and beauty drinks Angela drinks every night. I should have checked before going shopping. I regretted, but it was too late. Reluctantly, I headed to the nearest supermarket, only to find they didn't stock the specific brand of beer. The beer Angela's husband preferred was a Belgian brand, not as readily available as domestic brands in any supermarket. Initially, I thought finding it would be easy if I just went to another store, but after visiting nearby supermarkets and drugstores that also sell food, I couldn't find the brand anywhere. Back then, map apps weren't as widespread, and I wasn't familiar with the area around Angela's condominium, so I had no idea where to find what stores. Despite rushing around in a panic, I couldn't find it, and time was running out. Eventually, I caught a taxi to a liquor store a bit further away and finally found the beer. By the time I returned to the condominium, it was nearly 5 p.m. I just wanted to put the beer in the fridge and head home. As I entered Angela's room, I saw her husband, Charles, standing in the living room. "Charles, you're home early." As I said this, trying to tidy up the apron and the bag of food containers left on the sofa. "What's all this?" "I was told we hired someone to take care of the house," he questioned. According to Charles, he had initially planned to invite his mother to live with them since they were both going to be working full-time. "My family is just like my wife's. My dad has passed away, and since I have no siblings, my mom is the only one I can rely on. So, I asked her to live with us in exchange for helping with household chores," he explained. However, Angela retorted, "Then I want to invite my mom to live with us too. It's unfair and dishonest to favor only your mother." I was scolded for that. As a result of the discussion, it was decided not to rely on either of our parents, but to hire someone for the household chores. And it was settled that we would share the costs for this. However, in reality, Dorothy and I were secretly called upon to do the housework. Upon learning the truth, Charles immediately contacted Angela's mobile phone. Perhaps sensing trouble, Angela and Dorothy rushed back from their trip, but it escalated into a big fight with Charles demanding explanations. Unable to leave and forced to listen in, it seemed Angela had been using the money Charles gave her for housekeeping on her own spa treatments and leisure activities with Dorothy. Dorothy managed to apologize on the spot, promising to be more careful in the future. But later on, it came to light that Dorothy and Angela had been gifting presents to and going out drinking with the handsome stylist at their favorite hair salon. Furious, especially after the previous incident, Charles refused to listen to Dorothy's persuasion, leading to a divorce. Since Angela and her husband had only been married for about 5 years and lived in a rental condominium, there was no dispute over assets, and they divorced without any compensation. It seems she couldn't bear the rumors at the workplace since they worked at the same company. Angela, having been scouted, resigned and moved to another company simultaneously with her divorce. However, it seems she struggled to build her career as hoped in the new environment. Angela, frustrated, began to lash out at me along with Dorothy. "It's all your fault this happened. If only you had handled things better, none of this would have occurred. You're the one who ruined my life." That's how they started blaming me. Moreover, at a time when I was distressed over not being able to have children, Dorothy mocked me, saying, "I wanted to see my grandchildren, but I guess it's for the best. A grandchild born from such a defective woman wouldn't have been lovable anyway." She said that bluntly. The sheer unfairness made me burst into tears. But what shocked me more was when Paul saw me crying and disdainfully said, "If you're going to cry and regret your sins now, why couldn't you have just done as they said? It's me who wants to cry, being caught up in your mistakes." Hearing that made me feel so devastated, my legs almost gave way. Because it meant Paul seriously thought I was to blame, despite knowing everything. In other words, I had no allies in this house. Realizing this, I immediately thought of divorce, but being a housewife with no job made it not so simple to just say I wanted a divorce. I could go back to my parents' house, but moving back unemployed to a house where my brother and his wife lived nearby would just make me feel small. And it would likely be hard to find a job in the countryside that would allow me to live on my own. So, I decided to focus first on establishing a financial foundation, swallowing my pride. I found a part-time job in accounting, secretly relying on connections from my previous job. I got permission by tearfully telling Dorothy and Paul, "It pains me to just be a housewife when we're struggling to have children, so I want to at least work a part-time job to help with the household finances." And I started working the next month. Of course, neglecting housework could lead to snide comments and possibly demands to quit my job. That's why I pushed myself hard, even when tired or feeling unwell. I made no compromises at work, seizing any chance to improve and continuing to strive. As a result, I was promoted to a full-time position in the second year of my part-time job. 5 years later, I was invited by a former boss to join the current air conditioning company and have continued to work hard. But recently, as we approached our 20th wedding anniversary, after dinner, as I was doing the dishes, Paul came and said, "Come to the living room, I have something to tell you." It was unusual for him to seek me out as he usually spent his time happily with Dorothy, indifferent to whatever I was doing in the house. With that thought, I went to the living room, and before I could even sit down, "This has already been decided," Paul began. "Starting next month, I'm going to live with Mom and Angela," he declared. Dumbfounded, Dorothy added, "Angela's been overworked at her new job, got sick, and needs to recuperate at home. It's best for her to relax here. And if that's the case, it's better without an extra mouth to feed, right?" Then, coming over to my side on purpose, she said, "Parasites from outside the family should go back to their own homes," making a shooing gesture at me. They watched my reaction with a malicious smile, but inside, I smiled at the thought of being freed from this hassle. Then I slowly smiled at them and said, "I understand. I'll leave tomorrow afternoon." As I walked to my room, I glanced at their faces, as dumbfounded as I had been a moment ago. The next morning, after seeing Paul off to work, I waited for the second-hand goods buyer I had contacted the night before. Unaware, Dorothy was startled by the arrival of the unfamiliar men, but we started the work without minding her. From the kitchen, the refrigerator, oven range, dishwasher, Dorothy's favorite soda maker, and dining set were all taken. Of course, I didn't forget the IH cooking heater. Next, in the living room, the TV, air conditioner, the diligently working robot vacuum, and AI speaker. The off-season hot carpet and sofa set were also listed. Then, the fully automatic washing machine, Paul's room's computer desk, and bookshelf. In addition, the air conditioner, bed, and dresser in Dorothy and Paul's rooms were quickly appraised. As the dealer started making a call, Dorothy, seemingly coming to her senses, rushed over furiously. "Hey! What are you starting here? Entering people's bedrooms!" she shrieked at me, to which I replied with a smile. Since I'm just a parasite from outside the family, I thought I should at least take care of my own belongings before making my exit. Just then, additional personnel called by the dealer arrived. After that, the furniture and appliances listed were swiftly moved out of my husband's family home. Overwhelmed by the efficient and purposeful movement, Dorothy could only pace restlessly around. Then, as a final touch, after removing all the room lights, the dealer quickly left. What remained were Paul's computer and the bedding for his bed placed directly on the floor, and Dorothy's cosmetics left on the floor, visible to the eye. Then, Dorothy exclaimed again.
Wait a minute! Do you think you can get away with doing something like this?
To which I simply responded, I'll be consulting a lawyer for the rest. With that, I left my husband's family home, pulling along a suitcase I had packed the night before. A week later, after receiving a call from the lawyer I had hired, Paul, Dorothy, and Keiko rushed to the lawyer's office on the same day. When I arrived late,
You call us here and then show up late. What a disgraceful woman!
Immediate angry shouts were thrown at me. But then, Mr. Smith, the lawyer, clarified. We did not summon you here. It was you who came unannounced right after we informed you that I would be handling future negotiations. Hearing this, the normally confrontational Paul immediately quieted down. Then, as if seeking vengeance for her son, Dorothy was ready to fight. Now that we're face to face, let's talk. After leaving like a thief, there's no way you can just come back. But if you're willing to apologize and show remorse, that's a different story. She said in one breath, glaring at me. Angela and Paul were nodding vigorously beside her, probably thinking I would jump at the chance to discuss this topic. How naive. At my signal, the lawyer smoothly began. Of course, she has no intention of returning. The discussion is about signing the divorce papers, property division, and compensation. Stunned by these words, the three of them exclaimed,
We're not getting a divorce!
Property division and compensation.
How audacious! How dare you!
All at once, creating a racket. When things got out of control, the lawyer's coughing brought some quiet, and I calmly stated, Divorce is a settled matter. If you do not agree, we are prepared to proceed with mediation or court. They tried to raise their voices again, but another cough from the lawyer made them quiet down. After some whispered discussions among themselves, they surprisingly quickly signed the divorce papers I presented. However, their attitude changed again when it came to property division and compensation.
How audacious to talk about property division! You were just a part-timer, practically a parasite to Paul. To think we made such a failure our son's wife, we should be the ones receiving compensation. We won't pay a penny!
They began to berate again. Then, I presented the recent 5 years household accounts and the bank account statements I used for managing living expenses. Initially, Paul and Dorothy didn't understand, but as the lawyer explained with the documents, their complexions darkened. Because for about the last 5 years, I had been paying approximately $3,200 a month for living expenses, practically covering everything.
That's ridiculous! I've been contributing $1,500 a month to our household.
Paul protested, but against the $1,500 Paul deposited, the revolving credit payments for Paul and Dorothy's cards were nearly the same amount. Effectively, even if his salary was deposited, it just went out from one hand to the other. Instead, the $3,200 from my salary account covered the remodeling loan, Paul and Dorothy's car loan, groceries, and all the loans for furniture and appliances. In the past 5 years, since Linda became the head of the accounting department at her current company, Almost all of her income went into the household. That amounts to about $190,000 in total. Despite such contribution, it's quite something to be called a parasite, the lawyer stated. The three were wide-eyed, flipping through the documents, but what the lawyer stated was an undeniable fact. Realizing they were at a disadvantage, Dorothy suddenly said,
"Hey, Linda. We were once husband and wife, daughter-in-law and mother-in-law, and sisters-in-law, weren't we? Let's stop fighting and walk our separate paths peacefully."
She tried to appeal to me with a conciliatory tone. I responded, "Yes, that's right. And I also let my temper get the best of me the other day and sold off all the furniture and appliances. Let's both act like adults and part ways peacefully." With that, I requested the lawyer to draft a divorce agreement. We both agreed to renounce our rights to property division and compensation in the divorce agreement. After making it official with a notary public, Paul and I shook hands, ending our 20-year marriage. But the story didn't end there. After completing the procedures, Paul, Dorothy, and I went our separate ways. 2 months later, I began receiving numerous messages from them on the only social media account I hadn't blocked. Initially, I ignored them, but the constant barrage of messages, day and night, became too annoying. Hearing they had even shown up at the lawyer's office demanding to see me, I decided to meet them one last time to set things straight. This time, I arrived a bit earlier than the agreed time, but Paul and the others were already there. Looking restless and somewhat shabbier than before. As soon as they saw me, Paul barked,
"You bought a room in that new condominium in front of the station, didn't you?"
I had chosen a property not affiliated with Paul's company, but they must have found out somehow. Then Dorothy joined in, yelling,
"Where did you hide that money? If it's from during our marriage, it should be shared property, right? Coward!"
Their noise was unbearable, so I reminded them that we had both agreed to waive our rights to property division. They seemed to have conveniently forgotten anything unfavorable to them. Paul and my mother-in-law turned pale, but quickly retorted,
"That's the same as being tricked. The one who hid it is to blame."
The lawyer then coolly stated, "The funds for Linda's condominium purchase came from the sale proceeds of stock options she had received upon joining her current company. This does not fall under marital assets. If you still claim rights, we'll see you in court." Paul fell silent at that. But Dorothy went even further.
"Oh, is that so? If that's your attitude, we'll take this to court or whatever it takes."
Saying this, she huffed angrily. I then countered, "In that case, I'll also file for damages." The psychological damage wasn't minor, considering you were so openly looking for a new partner even before our divorce was finalized. I laughed as I said this, making Dorothy's face go pale. Next to her, Angela, who had been sitting dazed, also turned white when I added, "Of course, Angela, I'll be claiming damages for the emotional distress you've caused me. I've kept all the evidence of the verbal abuse and harassment you've inflicted on me after your divorce from Charles." I laid out a voice recorder, USB drives, and printed messages as proof. Lastly, I said,
"By the way, Angela, you know Mary, right? Actually, she's the daughter of my direct superior."
As I looked straight into Angela's eyes with a smile, her complexion turned even paler. I had already discussed and consulted my current employer to some extent about the situation to prevent any disruption in my work. In fact, that supervisor has a daughter named Mary. I've met her a few times at company BBQs and other events, a cheerful and wonderful woman. However, right after graduating from university and joining a company, Mary faced terrible harassment from her boss and is currently on leave due to mental health issues. The person who harassed her was Angela. Mary's parents divorced when she was young, and since then, she has been living with her father. Because Mary didn't have any close female figures, I was asked to take her out for meals and shopping to help her get a change of scenery, to which I happily agreed. Our conversations started with trivial matters, and I mostly listened to Mary, but I was shocked when Angela's name came up. At the same time, I learned that Angela's so-called medical leave was a complete lie. She was actually under a home stay order because her treatment of Mary had become a problem at work. This prompted me to start preparing for a divorce as quickly as possible. If Angela were to be demoted or fired, she would undoubtedly end up moving into my husband's family home. That would put me in an even more difficult financial and mental position. I was wondering how to initiate a divorce to my advantage when I was conveniently kicked out by them. I made a show of selling all the furniture and appliances. I pretended to make a sacrifice by giving up claims to property division and compensation. The reason I made a notarized document was because of the new share options. After all, due to Paul and Dorothy, I had hardly any savings, so if we had gone through a strict property division, I would have ended up paying out more. There's no guarantee of getting compensation if there's no money to pay it, even if I won the case. That's why it was necessary to make them give up their claim to property division by bringing up the issue of living expenses and making them feel indebted. Paul, Dorothy, and Angela finally understood everything. The foolish trio, who thought they could go back to their usual lives without the parasite me, left with their shoulders slumped. Their downfall afterwards was severe. Dorothy, just as I had pointed out, not only spread the word that she was going to decisively break up her son with his part-time job-capable wife and me, but also said,
"So, if you know any nice girls, I'd love for you to introduce them to my son."
She even went as far as to demand dinner parties to introduce her son to women. Of course, among those approached, people of standing talked behind Dorothy's back, saying it was absurd to look for a new partner for her son before even finalizing the divorce with his current wife. Moreover, setting such conditions, she must be greatly overestimating what her son is worth. They were said to have laughed at this. And the conditions Dorothy deemed suitable for Paul's wife were astonishing.
First off, she should be in her early 20s. Anyone older would be too influenced by society's nonsense about equality in marriage, right?
She was reported to have said. This alone was shocking enough, but Dorothy didn't stop there.
Of course, we'll cut ties with the wife's family, but before that, they should hand over their inheritance up front. We need someone with a certain level of assets and financial power. And could we get a medical checkup to ensure she's capable of having children?
She went as far as to say this, earning herself contempt from listeners. Unaware of the cold stares around her, she continued.
Of course, being tall, stylish, and beautiful is a given. Thank you in advance.
Naturally, no marriage proposals came Dorothy's way, and in her desperation, she apparently sent a flurry of urgent calls and messages. However, she was either turned down because no one met her conditions or simply ignored. Soon, the rumors of my divorce spread among friends, acquaintances, and neighbors, making them a subject of ridicule. Perhaps unable to bear the disdainful looks due to their previously arrogant behavior, they ended up confining themselves within their home, not going out anymore. Recently, there have been rumors about hearing screams, shouts, and the sound of breaking dishes coming from their house, supposedly from Dorothy. Previously, Dorothy would vent her frustrations on me or indulge in spending to relieve stress. Now, without me as her punching bag and unable to shop or take short trips for stress relief, she might be wreaking havoc at home. Meanwhile, Paul had left all financial matters to me since our marriage. He seemed not to understand the basics of budgeting, and even after the lawyer explained it clearly, he remained overconfident, thinking,
if she could manage the living expenses, then I can easily do it too if I put my mind to it. That appears to have been his careless assumption. However, Dorothy and Angela, who were supposed to take over the household chores, abandoned everything, considering it too much of a hassle. Meals became all delivery or takeout, and cleaning and laundry were left to a housekeeping service, among other miscellaneous tasks, leading to a financial breakdown in just 2 months. The credit card Dorothy used for living expenses was quickly revoked, and their meals turned to just toast and coffee for breakfast, instant noodles for lunch, and mainly takeout for dinner. Laundry was done all at once when they ran out of clothes. Living a life of only cleaning visible areas, they ended up leading a nutritionally unbalanced and unsanitary lifestyle. Paul, who was once praised for looking younger than his age, gained unhealthy weight, his skin became rough, his hair greasy, and his once handsome appearance vanished. Not fitting the image of a salesperson, he received a flood of complaints from clients. This led to him being relegated to back-end work, with a reduced salary. Paul reached out to the lawyer, saying, "I've come to my senses. I was deceived by Mom and Angela. I want to cut ties with them and start over." Through phone calls and emails. But as prearranged. "I've been instructed not to engage with you under any circumstances," was the firm response. They warned that if they attempted to approach my workplace or new home, the police would be contacted immediately. Thankfully, that put an end to any further contact. As for Mary, another main character in this saga, she was furious when I shared the entire story with her. "What's that supposed to mean? I thought she might have learned something from what happened with me, but she's blaming her divorce on you and resorting to such harassment. She's always been that kind of person, hasn't she?" she raged. After contacting the company where she was on leave, intending to resign, she was called in and questioned about her reasons. Mary explained that while the issue was personal and not directly related to her work, she disclosed everything about the situation to HR and administration. After ensuring that those present were shocked by the story, she stated, "There must have been faults on my part in the issue with me as well. I was hoping we could work together for the company if you sincerely reflected on it. But I cannot see that happening," she asserted firmly. While presenting her resignation letter, she said, "Working under her again would be a mental health hazard for me." Mary then transferred to a competitor that allowed her to work remotely until her health fully recovered. At her former department, the news of Mary's sudden resignation, who was supposed to be on leave, shocked everyone. Rumors spread that the harassment from Angela continued outside the company, leading to an uncontrollable situation. Some colleagues, who admired Mary, a leader among the younger staff, started considering changing jobs, prompting the higher-ups to convene urgent discussions. As a result, Angela was transferred to a subsidiary in another state after her home stay period ended. Despite Angela's resistance, claiming the transfer was an unfair treatment, the threat of dismissal forced her to reluctantly accept the assignment. However, at the new company, rumors had already spread, leaving her completely isolated, with no one to socialize with and receiving only the bare minimum of communication needed for work. Crying to Paul and Dorothy, "I want to quit. I want to come back," she was met with, "We don't need an unemployed troublemaker. Whose fault do you think this is?" "That's right. You are the real disaster and parasite." She was harshly rebuked by the two. Now, in a corner of the subsidiary where no one approaches her, she continues to work, a shadow of her former self. As for me, after the divorce from Paul was finalized and this whole ordeal ended, encouraged by Mary, I remarried my boss after about half a year of living together. To be honest, considering my 20-year marriage with Paul, I wasn't inclined towards remarrying, but Mary said something along the lines of, It might sound odd coming from his daughter, but marriage can be good depending on the partner. I think my dad, despite his age, is quite a catch.
Mary encouraged me, seeing my hesitation. Indeed, in less than a year, I've laughed more than during the entire 20 years with Paul. Having a partner to share a life where I can be myself has truly brought happiness. Sometimes, I think if I had made this decision sooner. I do feel a bit of regret, but dwelling on the past and wasting the remaining time seems far more wasteful. I plan to cherish the peaceful life ahead with my new husband and daughter.
Hey, isn't your 50th wedding anniversary coming up soon?
My daughter Stella said as she sat on the sofa, rubbing her growing belly. I'm currently living with Stella in her apartment to help take care of her during her pregnancy. As I folded the laundry, I glanced over at her and saw a very relaxed and gentle expression on her face. When we reach our 50th anniversary, I remember we talked about taking a trip to Europe a long time ago. I said,
"Wow, that sounds amazing,"
Stella exclaimed. 3 days after that conversation, there was a letter in the mailbox addressed to me, not Stella. The sender was my husband, William.
"Maybe Dad's getting lonely?"
And Stella joked. When I silently opened the letter, I found a completed divorce petition inside and couldn't help but sigh. Stella was shocked and at a loss for words upon seeing the divorce papers, but I started rummaging through my purse, looking for a pen to sign them.
"I need to submit this right away,"
I said, surprising her. "But just 3 days ago, you were talking about celebrating your 50th anniversary," she said. I took a pen out of my purse and carefully spread the divorce papers out on the table. After smoothing out the creases, I stared at William's handwriting for a moment, lost in thought. Come to think of it, it had been years since I'd seen William's handwriting. His name was written on the divorce papers in the same beautiful script I remembered from our younger days. "It's not a problem. Because my name is Melissa." Although I never heard it directly from my parents, I believe my family was quite poor. It was the spring when I had just become a high school senior. I didn't have any specific career aspirations or fields I wanted to study. I had a vague hope of going to college, but my parents couldn't understand that at all. The fact that my father himself only had a high school education and felt insecure about it might have been one of the reasons for their lack of understanding. Around this time, the college enrollment rate for women was gradually increasing. However, gender discrimination in the workplace was still commonplace, and it was expected for women to quit their jobs once they got married. Women back then were only seen as temporary employees until they got married. My father passionately argued that there was no need for a woman to have a 4-year college degree since she wouldn't be entrusted with any significant work anyway. In reality, we couldn't afford to send me to college, but my father seemed reluctant to admit that. Sensing this, all I could do was smile and say, "You're right, women don't need higher education." In the end, after graduating high school, I got a job at a bank close to my home. I thought that working in the financial industry would provide stability. I still remember the day I got the job at the bank. Even my usually strict father seemed happy. After working as a teller and handling certificates of deposit for a few years, I married William, whom I met at the same workplace. My parents were overjoyed about my marriage to William, but a few years after our wedding, his parents fell ill, and we ended up moving in with them at his family home. William's family ran a small diner in the countryside, and he repeatedly pleaded with me to let him take over the family business. To be honest, I didn't want to. I couldn't imagine myself running a diner with few customers. Seeing me hesitate to give an answer, William got up reluctantly and headed to the kitchen. I had heard he was good at cooking since we were dating, but it was the first time I saw him actually preparing food. He chopped the mushrooms and bacon into perfect sizes with more skill than I expected. As I stood behind William, he melted some butter in a pan, looking a bit embarrassed. He gently cooked the eggs until they were fluffy. Then, he slid the omelet onto a plate with care. I took a bite of the perfectly shaped omelet with my fork.
It's delicious.
I genuinely thought it was delicious. And if I didn't agree to him taking over his parents' family business here, I felt a tightness in my chest thinking that this flavor would be lost forever.
Melissa, I know it might be hard on you, but I promise to make you happy. Will you run the diner together with me? Then, for the rest of our lives, whenever I say I want to eat this, you have to make me this omelet, okay?
At my words, he was overjoyed and started crying, pressing his chef's hat against his face. From then on, William and I worked tirelessly. We worked almost every single day of the year, including weekends. Even though our days were incredibly busy, William and I decided to make time for date nights every once in a while, just like a married couple should. Just walking through town holding hands made my heart feel warm. Eventually, on an autumn night when I was 34, I went from being a wife to being a mom. When our only daughter Stella was born, I didn't go to the diner, but I mustered up my strength and worked as much as I could so as not to overburden my elderly in-laws. The days since I met William and got married seemed to have passed by at an astonishing speed. When Stella, who had just become a high school senior, uncommonly said she had something to talk to me about, I faced her as she looked down, hesitating about something.
It's about my future plans. Yeah. I'm listening. It's not that I have something specific I want to do, but for now, I want to go to college.
I'm sorry. She apologized to me. I didn't understand what she meant by I'm sorry. William poked his head out of the kitchen for a moment, came over, and looked down at Stella sitting there with a wry smile.
This diner will end with our generation. Don't worry about anything, Stella.
I noticed his words. I hadn't imagined that our daughter felt a sense of responsibility to eventually take over this diner. Come to think of it, I remembered with a wry smile that when I was young, I also wanted to go to college for the time being.
Going to college for now. I think that's a good idea. But I don't have any goals or dreams for the future. Why don't you go to college to find your dream? If you can't find it, you can always quit.
William agreed with my opinion, and Stella went on to college. Even as many seasons changed, the menu we served at our diner always stayed the same. The parsley growing in the planter that we used as a garnish for the omelets never told me what season it was. Only Stella's gradual growth into adulthood made me feel the passage of time. Stella, who was attending college while working part-time as a waitress, was already facing job hunting season in the blink of an eye. The moment I saw Stella in her job hunting suit, I patted her on the back while looking at William, who had tears in his eyes.
If you don't get any job offers, we'll hire you at our diner.
Stella laughed so hard her back teeth showed and went off to job interviews. A few months later, she informed us that she had decided where she would be working. Stella was going to join a foreign venture company that neither William nor I had ever heard of. The documents Stella brought home when she started working were all in English, which I couldn't understand at all, but Stella happily told me about it while eating an omelet.
I want to create a service that doesn't exist in the world yet. Maybe I have the potential to change history, you know?
Stella looked very strong in her suit. Her figure was full of possibilities, clearly defining her goals and continuing to pursue her dreams. Beyond the words going to college for now, Stella had created her own dream with her own strength. Seeing her like that, I found myself lost in thought, thinking,
there's nothing more we can do for her now.
Around this time, William and I were about to enter our 60s. Since we were self-employed, there was no clear retirement age, but we started thinking about our life together in our golden years, which would come someday. With Stella no longer needing our care, we didn't have to open the diner every day, and due to physical limitations, we decided to increase the number of regular holidays a bit. Maybe because he had more free time, William started a new hobby of buying lottery tickets. However, he never won anything, so he started dabbling in horse racing and other forms of gambling. That being said, he wasn't spending that much money, so I didn't say anything, thinking it was good for him to have a hobby. Time passed again, and even as the times changed, the signature dish at our diner remained the omelet. After the peak hours when customers came in, I was wiping down the tables with a cloth when Stella and an unfamiliar man showed up without any notice. "Sorry for not letting you know." I had work nearby, so I thought I'd introduce him while I was at it. The man she brought with her was named Justin, and he was a serious-looking guy wearing a gray suit with his hair neatly styled with gel. From what I heard, he was an employee at a bank in the same group as the one I used to work at, and they met through a mutual acquaintance. Stella, now in her mid-30s. She wasn't in a rush to get married, but considering child-rearing, Stella seemed to think it would be better to tie the knot sooner rather than later. Apparently, from the moment she met Justin, she was determined to marry him and got close to him with that intention. They had only been dating for a few months, but they said they wanted to get married. As I gave a wry smile at headstrong Stella, William made them both omelets. "If you two have made up your minds, work hard and do your best." Stella and Justin thanked him at the same time and started eating the omelets with gusto. I didn't tell them that day, but our diner was set to close in a few years. William and I were both almost 70 years old. I felt like the omelets he made in the distant past were even more beautiful. "Yeah, Dad's omelets are definitely the best." I stared intently at William's profile as he smiled contentedly at her compliment. Sometime after that, we received the news that the two of them had gotten married and Stella was pregnant soon after. For William and me, this year marked our 49th wedding anniversary. The news of Stella's pregnancy and our approaching 50th anniversary celebration. I couldn't contain my overflowing joy at the celebrations coming all at once, even as I was serving customers at the diner. A while later, I got a call from Stella. I was looking forward to her inviting us to the condo she said she bought after finding out she was pregnant, but Stella's voice over the phone was gloomy. From what she told me, Stella wanted to put the child in daycare once they were a bit older and return to work right away. However, Justin said he wanted Stella to become a stay-at-home mom, and it seemed their opinions differed. From there, their marital relationship rapidly deteriorated. Now, they were apparently in a situation where they were living separately. I gave a wry smile, thinking it was quite a premature discussion when she hadn't even given birth yet, but it was awful for him to leave Stella on her own while she was pregnant. "Well, I don't really understand anything about marital issues, but once things settle down, you two should have a proper talk again." "Yeah, thanks. Your belly must be quite big now, right? I'll come over there to help take care of you." "But the diner." I quietly shook my head inside the empty diner. Recently, William had been closing the diner more often, citing poor health as the reason. Now, we could barely open 2 days a week. Despite closing the diner due to poor health, William was frequently going out. When I asked him the reason, William would always say, "I'm getting advice from an old acquaintance from work." The way William explained it was very rushed, and I found it a bit suspicious. As Stella's due date approached, I visited her apartment and ended up staying there for a while. Stella's apartment already had a baby bed prepared for the arriving infant, and cushioning mats were laid out on the flooring. Justin, who was supposedly separated, properly returned to the apartment that day and politely greeted me, saying, "Thank you for your help." He then handed me a thick envelope containing a sizable amount of money. When I tried to firmly push it back, he shook his head weakly. I could sense from the thickness of the envelope that Justin, in his own way, was thinking about his family. Her belly was swollen and large, and it seemed painful for her to stand, so I had her sit on the sofa while I took care of cleaning and laundry. I strongly requested Justin, "I'm not in a position to meddle in your separation, but I'll call you when her labor starts, so please come right away." He nodded with a serious expression.
"Hey, isn't your 50th wedding anniversary coming up soon?"
Stella said as she sat on the sofa, rubbing her growing belly. As I folded the laundry, I glanced over at Stella and saw a very relaxed and gentle expression on her face. "When we reach our 50th anniversary, I'd like to take a trip to Europe."
Wow, that sounds amazing.
3 days after that conversation, there was a letter in the mailbox addressed to me, not Stella. The sender was William.
"Maybe Dad's getting lonely?"
And Stella joked. When I silently opened the letter, I found a completed divorce petition inside and couldn't help but sigh. Stella was shocked and at a loss for words upon seeing the divorce papers, but I started rummaging through my purse, looking for a pen to sign them.
"I need to submit this right away."
Stella was surprised by my words. "But just 3 days ago, you were talking about celebrating your 50th anniversary." I took a pen out of my purse and carefully spread the divorce papers out on the table. After smoothing out the creases, I stared at William's handwriting for a moment, lost in thought. Come to think of it, it had been years since I'd seen William's handwriting. His name was written on the divorce papers in the same beautiful script I remembered from our younger days. Back when we both worked as bank tellers, he was my senior, so I remember him teaching me tricks for writing neatly right after I joined the bank. When writing numbers or letters, you should write them about half the size of the line, just in case you need to make corrections. He told me that numbers look neat when you write them with the same spacing and at the same angle. Since William and I worked at the same place, our handwriting was quite similar. "It's not a problem. I saw it coming," I answered Stella, but I was desperately trying to hide my shock at him actually sending divorce papers. Stella walked over to me with great effort, supporting her large belly with both hands, and patted me on the shoulder. When Stella asked if I was feeling down, I shook my head. "I'm really okay," and I said with a smile. However, Stella didn't seem convinced and wouldn't leave my side, so I stopped signing the divorce papers for the moment and had her sit on the sofa. As we sat together on the sofa, I quietly started to speak.
"You know, just before I came here, William and I had a fight."
As the days we didn't open the diner increased, William, who had too much free time on his hands, was going out almost every day. I spent my time cleaning in front of the diner or chatting with the neighbors, as I had nothing specific to do. While spending my days like that, regular customers would say things like, "Oh, you're not open today?" and express their disappointment, which made me want to open the diner after all. I wanted William to understand this feeling. So, as soon as he came home at night, I would ask him right away. Even when I asked where he had been, he wouldn't give me a proper answer, just saying things like he went for a walk or to the hardware store. He never seemed to be particularly well-groomed when going out, so I wasn't worried about him cheating, but one day I decided to follow William. William got on a bus line I wasn't familiar with and got off in a town I didn't know. The moment he got off the bus, I realized it was near a racetrack and stopped following him. William's back as he walked towards the racetrack entrance looked so unfamiliar to me that I could hardly believe it was the back of the man I once loved. After watching William enter the racetrack, I decided to go back home. I took out my valuables from my closet. I checked my bank balance and decided to hide my valuables somewhere William wouldn't notice. When evening came and William returned home as usual, he sat down in the living room and started watching TV. I sat down properly in front of William and asked, "You were at the racetrack, weren't you?" William shouted, looking thoroughly fed up.
"I don't know." "Hey, when are you planning to open the diner next? Lately, you've been making weekends regular holidays too." "Listen, I'm already 74 years old, you know? Think about my physical condition when you talk. I can't open the diner on busy weekends." I told him about how I cleaned in front of the diner while William was out and chatted with the neighbors. Even the regular customers are feeling lonely because the diner hasn't been open lately. There are people waiting for our diner to open, you know? I spoke passionately. But William muttered, "But weekends are tough because it's so busy." "Isn't it because the racetrack is open on weekends?" At the words I blurted out, William's eyes widened, and he threw the newspaper on the table at me. As I picked up the newspaper that fell on the floor, "It's my money!" William shouted. "Gambling or whatever, it has nothing to do with you. Hurry up and make dinner." What I picked up was a horse racing newspaper, with red marker marks in several layers. Witnessing my husband getting more and more absorbed in horse racing, I felt conflicted. I didn't really want to say something like this, but I said it. Those words we promised a really long time ago. "Hey, I'm tired today, so make me an omelet." "You're better at making them than I am, William." As I said it out loud, I suddenly felt embarrassed. I decided to use the words I had promised William when I was young, for the rest of our lives. "Whenever I say I want to eat this, you have to make me this omelet, okay?" And William was staring at me with a furrowed brow and a scornful expression. "Huh? I can't eat something that greasy. Don't you have anything lighter?" I felt like something was crumbling inside me. Not even showing any sign of noticing my state, I shouted at William, who was pestering me about dinner. "You're always gambling like this. I hid the important things because it seems like you might even use up our retirement savings." "What? What do you mean by that?" From there, a huge fight really continued. We had a lot of fights to begin with since we always worked together at the same place. But this was the first time we had fought over something money-related. He seemed quite dissatisfied with entrusting me to manage our savings, and he berated me, saying he was more worried about me forgetting things and losing important items. In the end, we continued not speaking to each other after the fight, and the diner stayed closed for a while. And after fighting, I came to Stella's condo to help with the delivery, and now Stella and I are staring at the divorce papers sent by him. In the middle of our fight, William had even said, "If we break up, I can use my money freely, right?" I was thoroughly fed up with him and had lost all patience. I said things like wanting to go on an overseas trip for our 50th wedding anniversary in front of Stella, but that was just my wishful thinking. If only he would change his mind while I'm at Stella's condo. Those hopes and wishes vanished like bubbles, all too easily. I stare at the divorce papers on the table. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Stella is looking at me with worry. "Don't make that face, Stella. I've never made a wrong choice in my life. I've always lived each moment to the fullest. Once I sign this piece of paper, my new life will begin. It's not decided by anyone else. It's the life I chose for myself." William probably sent the divorce papers as a threat. But I wrote my name there in the neatest handwriting I could muster. I'm 71 years old this year. I was filled with joy at being able to enjoy the rest of my life as I pleased. As soon as I tried to submit the divorce papers to the court,
Stella hurriedly stopped me. She understood my determination to get divorced, but she said there were a few things we needed to prepare before that. Stella called a younger female colleague to the condo. The cute-looking woman, just a bit younger than Stella, was a lawyer Stella was close with at work. We discussed things like property distribution that needed to be decided with William during the divorce. The discussion progressed in the direction of William getting the restaurant that also served as our home, while I would get most of the cash. My divorce from William proceeded smoothly. We properly divided our assets and ended our relationship without leaving any grudges. William said spiteful things like, "It feels great to be divorced. Now I can gamble freely." But he used up all his money in just a few months and shamelessly asked me to lend him some.
"I don't have any money to give to a man who's more interested in gambling than me, Stella, and our soon-to-be-born grandchild."
At my words, William couldn't say anything back and just stayed silent over the phone. Eventually, William somehow managed to reopen the diner on his own, but it seemed his mind was still on gambling after all. He even gambled with the restaurant's sales, and in the end, he apparently didn't even have the funds to buy ingredients. Meanwhile, Stella gave birth without any issues. Due to her age, it was classified as a geriatric pregnancy, so she delivered at a university hospital far from home. When Stella called saying she was admitted as her due date approached and labor had started, I rushed over to find Justin already holding Stella's hand with a serious expression. It seemed he was present for the delivery, and even though they were separated, I felt relieved that they cherished each other. On the day Stella and I returned to the condo after the successful delivery, I had told Justin to come to the condo. And I kept explaining to Stella, who now had a baby, how essential the presence of a father figure was for her. I tried to persuade them both with the most heartfelt words I could muster. It's a bit odd for me to lecture them when I had just recently gotten divorced myself, but when I made that joke, Stella teared up a little. Justin apologized, reconsidered, and told Stella he wanted to live together again and raise the baby.
"Wait, come to think of it, what were we even fighting about?"
I laughed.
"It was because you said you wanted to go back to work right after giving birth, right?"
And I poked her shoulder lightly. She gazed at the baby cradled against her chest with a serene expression.
"Oh, right,"
she murmured.
"For now, I just want to be with the baby all the time for a while."
Saying that, she gently hugged the baby, whose eyes weren't even open yet. I also found myself approaching Stella and burying my face near the baby's tummy. There was a milky scent and that indescribably sweet smell unique to babies. In the end, she returned to work 2 years later. But it seemed her desire to be with her child hadn't changed, so she was able to switch to working remotely from home. I had planned to rent an apartment nearby, but Stella and Justin strongly wished for me to continue living with them, so I did. When Justin pleaded, "With just the two of us, we'll end up fighting. Please live with us," I couldn't refuse. But the truth was, there was a part of me that felt happy to be needed by someone like that. Then one day, as I was walking around town on a stroll, I learned that the diner I had worked at for many years had closed down and was now just an empty lot. I gazed at the spot with a "for sale" sign stuck in the ground and quietly closed my eyes. I felt like there was a gaping hole in my heart, as if a place filled with effort and memories had been lost. This place that was once bustling with many customers now had nothing left. Even as I felt the sadness welling up, I stared at the empty lot without looking away. I wonder how long I stood there like that. After a while, I noticed 2 men in suits in the empty lot, holding some documents and checking the land. I approached them out of curiosity, and they responded very kindly. They said they were going to open a restaurant on this vacant land. The man in the clean-cut suit said,
We're planning to build a restaurant here and open it next year." He smiled at me and said, "Please do come and eat here when it opens." "Is that so? How wonderful. By the way, what kind of restaurant is it?" The man in the suit replied, "It's a diner that prides itself on its omelets." I might have ended up staring at his face intently for a moment. His dream, full of hope and anticipation for the future, would surely come true in this place. "You know, there used to be a long-established diner here that lasted for over 50 years until very recently. That's why your restaurant will definitely thrive too." The man in the suit looked happy, and I left the spot. My grandchild, who is still so young, the new diner that will be opening soon. There are so many things to look forward to. I couldn't hide the smile that naturally spread across my face, and I just kept walking straight ahead. Ah, feels so refreshing. Revived. Ensley, my sister-in-law, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, came over to our place and sprawled out on the air-conditioned living room sofa, as usual. My daughter Miranda, who was doing her homework, frowned in annoyance. "Let's see, haven't finished your summer project yet, have you?" Ensley peered over at the summer plan. I remember those days. With summer projects, you never really know what to do, right? In that regard, Miranda, I'm kinda envious of you. "What do you mean?" Miranda asked, puzzled. "Well, not many kids are born with such an interesting face like you. How about you compile something about that challenge of yours?" LOL. It'd be easy, right? Miranda was born with a rare condition called cleft lip and palate, which resulted in splits in her upper lip and palate. She had undergone numerous surgeries over the years, but more than anything, it was the stares from others that hurt her the most. The condition made her face asymmetrical from her mouth to her nose, and the ignorant stares were painfully sharp. Why am I the only one like this? Miranda had tearfully asked before. I couldn't stay silent at Ensley's incredibly insensitive remark. Ensley, even if we're family, there are things you should and shouldn't say. I was just stating the facts. If she compiles something about her interesting condition, everyone will be pleased, won't they? Ensley is laughing, saying Miranda's condition is interesting, without knowing how much pain and struggle Miranda and we have gone through. Don't worry about what she says, Miranda. I grabbed Ensley's arm, ready to forcefully drag her out of the house. That's when Miranda stood up slowly, smiling, and said, "Don't worry, Mom, I've decided. My name is Eleanor. I live with my elementary school-aged daughter Miranda. My husband Dennis is a good husband and father, but he's away on work assignment. I'm home, Mom. I'll go wash my hands, then I'll help with chopping the vegetables." Saying this, Miranda took off her mask. Nowadays, everyone wears masks when going out due to the pandemic. But Miranda has been wearing a mask in front of anyone other than family since she was young. She must still feel resistance to showing her bare face. Miranda was born with a condition called cleft lip and palate, which is not commonly known. It's a congenital condition where the upper lip and palate are split, occurring in about 1 in 1,000 births in the United States. Seeing our child for the first time, my husband and I were shocked but also vowed to protect her no matter what. Cleft lip and palate requires several surgeries, and Miranda's first surgery was just 2 months after she was born. Though the surgery closed her mouth, it didn't completely correct the distortion in her mouth and nose. Most people don't know much about this condition, which made me worried about how Miranda would be perceived as she grew up. There would surely be times when Miranda would get hurt. Still, Dennis and I discussed letting Miranda live like any other child, attending school and going to amusement parks just like her peers.
The days of hospital visits must have been painful for young Mirinda, who usually doesn't complain much. Mirinda would become anxious before surgery, saying, "Mom." There must have been unspeakable anxiety clinging to her. She wouldn't let go of my hand until she fell asleep. As an elementary student, Mirinda would come home and share various school events with laughter.
Today, Gerald in my class mimicked the teacher, and it was so funny. During lunch, we played rock, paper, scissors to see who gets the dessert of the kid who was absent, and Caitlin won. Over the last long weekend, Tyrone from the next class went on a vacation with his family. But their dad got lost while driving, and it was a huge mess.
Mirinda would tell fun stories at dinner every day, but I noticed something off. None of the stories Mirinda told included herself. Mirinda always just tells me about things others have said or done. She never mentions doing anything with a friend herself. Despite a bad feeling, I lacked the courage to directly ask her about it. One day in 2nd grade, Mirinda came home crying.
"What's wrong? What happened?"
Seeing Mirinda cry, except before surgeries, surprised me. Mirinda was silent, looking frustrated, but then she couldn't hold back anymore and started crying louder. "It's okay, you can cry all you want." I hugged my daughter tightly. After calming down, Mirinda said, "You know, Mom," and shared feelings she had kept to herself. Even though Mirinda wears a mask to school to hide her mouth and nose's distortions, she has to remove it during lunchtime. The first time they ate together, a boy sitting across from her pointed and laughed, saying, "Your face looks weird." That started it, and other kids gathered around, saying, "Really? That's funny," expressing their thoughts aloud. The teacher quickly scolded everyone, "Back to your seats," settling the situation. But from that day, Mirinda felt ostracized, unable to join any friend's circle. She had been enduring this for over a year. "Why did you keep silent until now?" "Because, Mom and Dad, you always have it tough because of my condition, right? Surgeries cost a lot of money, and you have to go back and forth between the hospital and home for me. Mirinda, for US." Knowing Mirinda was considerate of us made me feel inadequate as a parent. Why am I the only one like this? Tears fell again from Mirinda's eyes after she finished speaking. "I'm sorry, Mirinda. Despite being blameless, she's had a hard time at school. Not just school. Mirinda might continue to be seen strangely by others because of her condition." I blamed myself, feeling responsible for her suffering. "I'm sorry, Mirinda. From now on, Mom promises to be by your side as much as possible to protect you. Even for busy Dad at work, I'll be with you." I hugged Mirinda again tightly. When I told Dennis after he came home, "It's hard not being there when you're going through tough times. I've let you handle all the hardship alone," Dennis also blamed himself. "It can't be helped. I'll protect Mirinda's heart, and you protect our livelihood. Let's protect Mirinda together." Yes, we should. We vowed again to protect our daughter. From that day, I quit my job at the apparel company and became a housewife. In 3rd grade, Mirinda underwent her 4th surgery. While the first 3 surgeries were minor corrections, the 4th involved transplanting bone from her pelvis to her upper jaw. It was more extensive than before, but it made the distortion from her mouth to her nose less noticeable, making her look no different from other children. However, having bone removed from her pelvis made walking difficult for Mirinda, forcing her into a wheelchair for a while. Still, Mirinda would look at her face in the hand mirror and ask with a bright, radiant smile never seen before, "Hey, Mom. Do I look prettier now?" Seeing my daughter happy and smiling without feeling self-conscious made me happy too.
"Yes, you're very pretty, Mirinda."
I brushed her hair and spoke to her. After a while, Mirinda began serious walking rehabilitation. She almost fell during the unfamiliar rehab, but when I tried to help, "Just watch, Mom," she scolded me. Holding onto the handrail, Mirinda grimaced with each step, "This is nothing. My face looks proper pretty now. Lucky, right, never showing any signs of weakness. Does it hurt? Are you okay?" I couldn't help but worry and wanted to support her physically. "If you always support me, Mom, there's no point in rehab." Mirinda laughed shyly. As a result of her positive attitude towards rehab, the pain in her hips completely vanished. And she could walk on her own without needing crutches anymore. 2 years later, Mirinda was in 5th grade. There were still scars on her lips, but they were hardly noticeable and less mentioned. It seems Mirinda has grown to like looking at her face in the mirror. Upon waking up, she heads straight to the bathroom and faces herself in the mirror with a smile. She used to dislike even approaching a mirror. The memory of those times feels like a distant past, making me chuckle to myself. "I wish I could see Dad," Mirinda sighed. Dennis has been on a work assignment far away. We sometimes communicate via video calls, but it's not the same as having him nearby. Sherry said her family is going on an overseas trip. Frederick is going camping. Everyone seems so lucky. Despite it being summer vacation, Mirinda lamented not being able to go anywhere due to our circumstances. One day, while we were spending a holiday at home, the doorbell suddenly rang. "I'll get it." Mirinda stopped her summer homework in the living room and headed to the entrance, as I was busy with household chores and couldn't leave them. "What, Aunt again? You came back?" I could hear Mirinda's displeased voice. "How rude. You came back? I'm your aunt, after all. Family can visit as many times as they want, right?" Saying so, the visitor entered the house without waiting for Mirinda's consent. It's cool here. Revived." I poked my head out from the balcony and welcomed the guest half-heartedly. "Welcome, Ensley." The guest was Ensley, Dennis's sister. According to Dennis, after graduating from high school, Ensley worked as an office clerk at a small trading company, but ended up quitting within 3 months after being reprimanded by a senior for taking too many days off and getting into a heated argument. Now, she's living back at home. Dad told me she doesn't even bother to look at job ads he shows her. Just throws them on the floor and spends all day playing video games. Dennis complained about Ensley's lack of motivation. Ensley just sat down on the sofa as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As Mirinda tried to return to her homework, Ensley, fanning her sweaty shirt front to catch some air, exclaimed, "It's so hot. This weather is absolutely crazy." Ensley loudly exclaimed, disregarding Mirinda, who was trying to study. When Mirinda frowned in annoyance, Ensley did not miss it. "Am I bothering you, niece?" she asked with a creepy smile, intentionally disturbing Mirinda. Mirinda just sighed without engaging, knowing from experience that arguing would only encourage Ensley to be more annoying. "Mirinda, I'd like something cold." "Auntie's thirsty," Ensley said in a cloying voice and hugged Mirinda. "Please stay away, it's hot." Mirinda pushed Ensley away with a calm voice as she tried to lean on her, and Ensley clicked her tongue. "What's with you? No charm at all. Eleanor, don't you have something to drink?" I took out coffee from the fridge, poured it into a cup, and handed it to Ensley. "Could you keep it down a bit? Mirinda is studying," I admonished Ensley in a low voice, though I knew it was futile. "You know, I always wonder." Ensley looked around the room and poked Mirinda's cheek with her finger, asking, "Why doesn't Mirinda study in her own room?" Seeing Mirinda swat her hand away, Ensley laughed as if amused. "To save on electricity," Mirinda answered irritably.
saving on electricity. So that's why you're scrimping? Mom isn't working, right? That's why you guys are poor.
Miranda slammed her hand on the table in frustration.
Don't compare me to someone who doesn't work despite being old enough. Are you talking about me? Wow, Miranda, that's harsh. Your mom doesn't work outside either. Always lazing around at home just like me, right? That's not true. Mom is busy being a housewife. She's always cooking, cleaning, doing laundry. There's a lot to do. She's not lazy like Aunt.
Miranda retorted with a firm stance.
Really? Even Miranda is being cold to me? Listen, my parents are like, if you want to use the air conditioner so much, pay the high electricity bill yourself. Can you believe that? Living with family and they say that? It's your own fault for not working and just lazing around and playing in your room all the time. Well, it's not like I can pay for that. Going to cafes costs money, department stores are far and a hassle. So in the end, the only place I can rely on is Miranda's house.
Despite Miranda's reluctance, Ensley hugged her again. This is how Ensley would come over unannounced, trampling over our lives every time. Even though she's Dennis's sister, I couldn't bring myself to forcefully kick her out. When I consult Dennis, who's away on his own, he says, kick her out immediately. If it comes to it, calling the police is fine. But she's still family, and I couldn't bring myself to do that. Taking advantage of my inability to stand firm, Ensley has been getting increasingly bold lately. Anyway, Eleanor, you've got it easy, right? Because you can just play around at home every day. I'm not taking it easy at all. I snapped back at Ensley, irritated. After engaging more than I should have, I calmed down and realized I shouldn't have. Predictably, Ensley got even more encouraged. It's fine to slack off, right? Just buy whatever you like from the grocery store for meals, and for cleaning, just quickly tidy up the places that catch the eye. That's what I would do, LOL. She suggested I take shortcuts in my role as a housewife.
Don't compare me with Aunt. Besides, it's annoying because of her I can't concentrate on my studies. Can you just go home?
Miranda protested strongly. Oh, scary. Ensley exaggeratedly shivered.
So, Miranda, what have you been studying? Should I help you? I might be able to teach you addition or subtraction.
I've already learned that, thank you. Please, just go home. Oh. What's this? Your summer project isn't finished yet. Ensley peered over at Miranda's planner. I remember those days. With summer projects, you never really know what to do, right? It's hard to find something you actually want to research. In that regard, Miranda, I'm kinda envious.
What do you mean? Well, not many kids are born with such an interesting face like you. Why don't you compile something about that condition? It'd be easy, right? LOL. It's about yourself, so you wouldn't have to research much.
I couldn't stay silent at my sister-in-law's incredibly insensitive remark.
Enough, Ensley. There are things you should and shouldn't say, even if we're family. Oh, scary, scary. I was just stating the facts. If she compiles something about her interesting condition, everyone will be pleased, won't they?
Ensley is calling Miranda's condition interesting. Laughing, without knowing how much pain and suffering Miranda and we have gone through. Miranda, don't worry about what such a person says. I grabbed Ensley's arm, trying to drag her out of the house with all my might. That's when Miranda stood up slowly and said with a smile, Don't worry, Mom. I've decided. In contrast to me, who was about to explode with anger, Miranda was completely calm.
Well then, Mirinda, I don't quite understand, but your mom seems really angry, so I'll leave.
Ensley said without a shred of remorse, smirking creepily as she prepared to leave. I wanted to unleash my anger on her, but Mirinda pulled at the hem of my shirt, stopping me. You too, Mom, shouldn't worry about what that person says. Looking at the suddenly quiet entrance after Ensley left, Mirinda spoke. She must have some plan in mind. Thinking this, I managed to suppress my anger. 3 months passed. Mirinda, it's okay to relax a bit. Saying that, the national newspaper reporter eased the slightly tense expression on Mirinda's face. Dressed in new clothes bought for this day, Mirinda smiled with confidence. That's the spirit. You're doing great. Praised by the handsome reporter, Mirinda's cheeks flushed slightly. 3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined Mirinda being interviewed by a national newspaper. The interview took place in a small cafe in the neighborhood, which we had reserved. The owner, who I've known for a long time, whispered to me, "Hasn't Mirinda become quite beautiful?" Indeed, the last time the owner saw Mirinda was before her 4th surgery. As Mirinda's mother, always watching her closely, it was hard for me to notice. But acquaintances who saw her without a mask after a long time were often surprised. Mirinda's treatment had progressed so much that her facial structure from her mouth to her nose was indistinguishable from other children's. Of course, some surgery scars remained, but they were hardly noticeable unless pointed out. Let's take one last photo. Smile. Prompted by the reporter, Mirinda smiled broadly without her mask. 3 months ago, on the night Ensley left, Mirinda declared to me, "I've decided on my summer project theme. I want everyone to know about me. I'll do what Aunt suggested." She didn't seem bothered by Ensley's words. In fact, she seemed more radiant than before. "Is that okay with you, Mirinda?" I asked. Laughing a little, Mirinda said, "Mom, you're always overprotective. I'm not the crybaby I used to be. This is something I've decided to do myself." Seeing my daughter so full of confidence, I felt reassured. "All right, then I won't stop you. Go ahead as you think is best, Mirinda." "Okay, got it." From that day, Mirinda began to confront her condition of cleft lip and palate again. Shortly after starting elementary school, she had been teased by classmates about the shape of her nose and mouth. Suffering in silence because she couldn't tell her parents. She compiled the numerous surgeries she underwent and the teasing into a booklet, including photos from those times. There's one photo that is particularly meaningful to me. It was taken the day Mirinda first opened up to us about the mean things said at school. Although she protested, "No, don't take a picture," I took it anyway. "Why did you take a photo?" She protested tearfully, but I hugged her tightly. "Someday, we'll look back at this day and laugh, Mirinda." At the time, Mirinda couldn't understand and just cried out of frustration. Afterward, we discussed why people hold such prejudices. We concluded that prejudice stems from ignorance. Indeed, cleft lip and palate is a rare condition, affecting 1 in 1,000 people. But with ongoing treatment, one's appearance can become indistinguishable from others. We hoped that more people knowing about the condition and its treatment would reduce the instances of patients being viewed strangely. That became our family's unified wish. In advancing her summer project, Mirinda set up a special website and conducted a survey for children suffering from the same condition and their parents. This revealed that other families, like ours, were troubled and pained by prejudice. Good luck, Mirinda. You're very brave. If there's anything we can do, just let us know. I realized Mirinda had many supportive comrades suffering from the same condition. Mom, thank you for giving birth to me. Thank you for raising me. Because you supported me, I was able to get this far. Mirinda whispered, looking at the photo. The hard worker is you, I replied. Mirinda had undergone numerous surgeries since she was very young. Especially the fourth surgery, which involved transplanting bone from her pelvis to her upper jaw, was the most challenging, leaving her unable to walk on her own for a while, but she never complained. She is truly a strong child. Of course, I feel like hiding my face with a mask. But I've come to think that this unique aspect of mine could be considered cool. Mirinda said confidently. A month after summer vacation ended, Mirinda came home from school and said, "Look. My summer project was highly praised at school, and I was awarded this certificate." She showed me the certificate, breathless and sweaty from her excitement. My friend said I was cool. Mirinda happily shared her school experiences. A month after that, a newspaper company contacted us for an interview. I read the interview article. Mirinda, you're amazing. Mirinda's article was published in a national newspaper, catching the eye of Dennis, who was on a work assignment. He immediately video called us. If you were going to be published, you could have told me. I was just reading the newspaper when suddenly I see Mirinda's face all over it. And I spit out the coffee I was drinking from surprise. It wouldn't have been fun if I told you beforehand. I wanted to see your reaction without saying anything first. So, I fell for the surprise, huh? Dennis laughed heartily over the video call. Mirinda peeked out and said, "Are you happy to see your daughter's face after so long, Dad?" Well, yes. But, you really gathered courage to compile something about your condition, didn't you? Then, Mirinda's smile faded, and she answered seriously. I presented it because I wanted to reduce the number of people who, like Aunt, say hurtful things out of ignorance about diseases and disabilities. Ensley? Did she say something to you? We revealed the hurtful things Ensley had said to Mirinda during her summer visit. That girl. Dennis sighed, I'll give her a piece of my mind. The next day, we received a call from Mael. I read Mirinda's article. It's amazing, Mirinda. But I heard Ensley said terrible things? Dennis called me yesterday, and I was shocked. Luke is furious. He's been saying he won't forgive Ensley since yesterday. I'm worried his blood pressure might go up. But Ensley really is trouble. Mael said, promising to make Ensley apologize soon. A few days later, Ensley came to visit as promised. Are you there? If you are, come out already. She banged on the door so hard I worried it might break, not seeming like she came to apologize, but rather irritated. When I went to answer, there stood Ensley, looking devilish. What are you doing on your own? She protested, not apologizing but complaining instead. I had no idea why Ensley was so angry. When I remained silent, thanks to your daughter stirring things up, I got yelled at by my parents and bro. Now I feel uncomfortable at home. How are you going to take responsibility? She demanded. Apparently, Ensley had been severely scolded by my in-laws and Dennis because of Mirinda's project. But I thought it was all Ensley's fault. Unable to hold back my anger at Ensley's lack of remorse, I exploded. Enough, Ensley. If you're not here to apologize, please leave. I finally let out the anger I had been holding back, even to Ensley, who kept repeating her arrogant attitude. For the first time, I openly protested, leaving Ensley momentarily taken aback. Whether you're my husband's sister or whoever, anyone who hurts my precious daughter is not family. Don't come to our house again. You're nothing but trouble. What? Getting angry all of a sudden? Silly. Even though I came to apologize, you're kicking me out. Fine then. I'll tell the family you're a stubborn DIL, just remember that. Miranda interjected while listening beside me. Aunt. I'm recording our conversation, so lying is useless. It'll be found out soon anyway, she said, admonishing Ensley like a child who won't listen. Oh well. I guess I'll forgive you just for today then. With those final words, Ensley left with a pale face.
Ah, that feels so much better.
Now in 5th grade, Miranda seems more mature than ever to me. She never used to complain, not because she didn't want to but because she didn't want to worry us. But now, it's different. Miranda isn't holding back tears anymore. She doesn't even feel the need to cry because she's become so strong and resilient. Looking at Miranda's serene profile, I couldn't help but feel a bit reflective. Maybe I've been too worried about her. With the sole intention of not letting her feel lonely, I quit my job to always be there for her. But it seems Miranda is fine now. Without me realizing, she has grown up and surrounded herself with many strong allies. Lately, she's been bringing school friends home more frequently.
What? Is there something on my face?
Miranda noticed my gaze and looked at me questioningly. Yes, lots of happiness.
What? That makes no sense.
Laughing at my response, Miranda seemed amused. Feeling her growth, I decided to rejoin the workforce at an apparel company I had been invited to rejoin. Eleanor, I read the newspaper. Miranda did great, didn't she? Every time my coworkers mentioned it, I calmly responded, she probably doesn't think she did anything extraordinary. She just presented her life as it is. One evening, Miranda shared her future dreams with me.
I want to become a doctor. To help children and families suffering from diseases and disabilities like mine. Facing myself through my summer project made me think that. And I've been thinking lately, there are people who can't run fast, those who struggle with studies. Tall people, short people. My condition is just another trait among those.
Hearing her aspirations, I felt hopeful for her future.
Oh, and by the way, a boy in my class told me he likes me.
Miranda casually mentioned her dream and then shared this news. Reporting this to Dennis via video call, he panicked.
What? Isn't it too early for her to be in a relationship? Hey, are you okay with this?
Calm down, my dear husband. I calmed down the frantically panicking Dennis. The fact that a boy confessed to Miranda probably means that the kids around her have stopped caring about her condition. As for Ensley, I heard she was kicked out by Dennis and the in-laws. Ensley, who had been lazing around at home every day without working part-time, finally decided to become independent after losing financial support. In reality, she had no choice but to do so. Now, she struggles with living alone in a small, old apartment, earning a little from part-time work. The wish Miranda had for her summer project, to reduce ignorant and hurtful comments about diseases and disabilities, is also my wish. Of course, 1 or 2 actions alone won't change the world. But that's exactly why we, who know the struggles and pain, must continue to spread the truth to the world. I vowed in my heart to continue watching over Miranda, ensuring her growth isn't hindered. Dennis has decided to return from his assignment. Dennis convinced his boss to allow him to work predominantly remotely. I won't let you two feel lonely again, he said. But then, you came back because you're worried Miranda might get a boyfriend, aren't you?
That's not the case,
Dennis awkwardly responded. Anyway, we're back to living happily and closely as a family of 3. A family that's always full of laughter, our pride and joy. David, my husband, handed me the divorce papers with the same casualness as if he was passing me a piece of junk mail from a shop. Stunned by the abruptness of it all, I stood there dazed, staring at the filled-out divorce application. What's up? Need a pen? Wait a second. Divorce? What do you mean? He spoke in a tone that seemed to look down on me, then pulled out a cigarette from his chest pocket and lit it. I'm selling the hotel. I couldn't believe my ears. Selling our classic hotel that has been in the family for generations? It was true that Nancy, my mother-in-law and the hotel manager, had recently become bedridden due to illness. I've already started talks with a hotel group. Eventually, I'll earn income without having to lift a finger in the hotel business. Cool, huh? Wait. At least wait until Nancy gets better to talk about the hotel. And this divorce thing. David wore a scornful smile. I'll take the hotel's revenue and the staff with me. Wait. Let's be rational. At least let's wait until Nancy's condition improves and we've discussed the hotel, then we can talk about us. Trying to buy time? Fine, I'll leave for today. The decision about this hotel is mine to make anyway. After David left the office, I was left standing there, dumbfounded. The door opened. Thinking David had come back, I tensed up for a moment, but it was Nancy. Nancy, who had been bedridden in her pajamas until just this morning, was now standing in the plain dress she usually wore for work. She smiled gently, embraced my shoulder. I'm sorry. She whispered quietly. Now, it's my turn. There was a sophisticated, slightly mischievous smile I had never seen before. My name is Sarah. I had long aspired to work in the towering office buildings downtown and spent years trading imported wines and beers at a trading company. But now, I've moved a few years ago and work as a front office manager at the hotel run by David's family. There was hesitation in leaving my career in my mid-40s, but now I find fulfillment working at this hotel. It's a classic hotel that has been passed down for generations, set in a remote, mountainous location with a secretive charm. In spring, cherry blossoms bloom, in summer, the lush greenery, in autumn, the beautiful fall colors, and now, the season surrounds us with snow-covered trees. The landscape is all dyed in silvery white, with only the steam from the hot springs faintly dancing into the night sky. The first words I blurted out when I first visited the hotel with David were, "I'm anxious." After David's father, Richard, who originally ran the hotel, passed away, and Nancy was left alone, David and I ended up working at the hotel. When we got married, David would say, "One day, I want to take over the family hotel." I thought it was just a vent, something he said when work got tough, so I didn't take it seriously. But after Richard's death, David quit his job right away. The night he quit, without even a farewell party, David drank at home. He seemed happy, drinking cheap wine probably bought from a grocery store, and playing American mahjong on his mobile phone. I didn't quite get it, but David was engrossed in American mahjong on his phone, taking pride in climbing the ranks the more he played. Richard also loved American mahjong, and he had even created an American mahjong room during a hotel renovation. Though meant for guests, hotel staff would join in if needed to fill numbers. Hearing such stories, David was really looking forward to working at the hotel. Hoping to get an invitation to play from a guest, he would stand at the reception, smiling at middle-aged men who looked like they might enjoy American mahjong. But once he started working, it was too busy for any mahjong invitations. He was caught up with preparing dinner, setting up the baths, and helping wherever hands were needed. David's hotel duties were quite demanding. The job of a hotel manager, as I imagined it, seemed more glamorous, just welcoming guests with a smile. But surprisingly, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes work and a lot to learn, and I was struggling. Nancy, kind as she is, would gently guide me. The first thing she taught me was how to make small decorations. The little ornaments we placed beside the dishes we served to guests were all handmade by the staff. During breaks and between work, making these with other hotel staff became a way to bond, and I quickly grew close to them.
One day, I hope David and Sarah will take over this hotel. As long as I'm fit, I'll support you with all I have,"
said Nancy. She looked too young for her age, over 60, elegant, and beautiful with a smile. Years of her conduct seemed ingrained in her, every move she made felt like that of a hotel manager. Could I become a hotel manager like Nancy? I thought, looking at Nancy, my mother-in-law, and the hotel manager, with admiration. Nancy seemed to appreciate my positive attitude and was very fond of me. One day, after about 2 months of me working as the front office manager and David as the owner in training.
Sarah, I haven't seen David since around noon. Have you heard anything?
Nancy asked me, looking a bit worried, as I was focused on the computer at the reception desk. She quickly checked the room reservations on her tablet.
I haven't seen him. Isn't he in the owner's room? We had planned to rotate David through different departments in the hotel to learn the owner's duties. Right now, he's assigned to odd jobs. David is the owner's assistant and he's not doing his job? It's embarrassing to admit, even though he's my son. He can't clean properly and always seems to find an excuse to escape. Sigh, really.
Nancy let out a small sigh. Even amidst our casual conversation, Nancy was efficiently managing guest information on her tablet. I checked my mobile phone, but there was no message from David.
Sarah.
I looked up when she called my name. Nancy leaned in close, making sure other guests wouldn't notice, and said in a soft voice,
I'm sorry. I'm feeling a bit chest pain. Would it be okay if I take a little break?
Yes, of course.
Are you okay? Is there anything I can do? I'll be fine. In my absence, you're the hotel manager. Sorry, and if you're unsure about anything, just contact me.
For a while after that, Nancy started spending more time lying down in the staff room and less time at the hotel. Sometimes she would come out of her room in casual clothes, saying,
I'm feeling ill, going to the hospital.
Then she'd leave alone by car. Worried about Nancy's health, I visited her room several times after finishing my work.
How are you feeling?
But her responses were never positive.
I'm sorry. I've been to several hospitals, but they can't find the cause of this chest pain.
Nancy apologized, looking remorseful. I managed to handle my duties as hotel manager as long as nothing too challenging came up. I felt I was communicating well with the staff, but no one mentioned David's absence, the future owner of the hotel. This made me anxious, thinking that maybe the staff had no expectations of David. That night, I decided to talk to David, who came home slightly drunk.
What's with that scary face? David, do you know that Nancy's been feeling unwell and hasn't been able to do much at the hotel?
So, that's what this is about. David sat down on the sofa, looking exasperated. Our home, a bit away from the hotel, was originally Nancy and Richard's. Nancy hardly ever comes here now, staying mostly in her hotel resting room. Many of our boxes from the move were still unpacked. David sat cross-legged, using a cardboard box as a backrest.
Listen. If Mom stays sick and can't move, then I'll have to handle staff schedules and oversee operations, right?
Of course.
That's why you're getting guidance from Nancy, right? It's just not what I expected. Hey! Before you talk about things not meeting your expectations, you should actually show up at the hotel and do your work.
I was aware that I spoke in a somewhat harsh tone, but the next moment, David suddenly stood up angrily and glared at me, saying,
Huh?
It was so sudden that I let out a small scream.
Eek!
David then awkwardly left the room. The clock on the wall showed it was 10 p.m. David didn't return to the room that morning. He completely abandoned his hotel duties, and Nancy's health didn't improve. The days got colder, though no snow fell. As I was cleaning the hotel entrance, I heard a faint bird call from the stream nearby. I looked closer and saw something strange on a broken branch near the stream. It was about the size of a pigeon, mostly white from a distance, but up close, it had black and white zebra stripes. The bird, with its odd, chicken-like head, looking like a boy with bed hair, was gazing intently at the water. It was a kingfisher. As I admired this rare bird, the sound of a car climbing the hill startled it, and it quickly hid in the trees. It was David, getting out of the car in a suit.
Hey, just now, on the other side of the river, there was this amazing bird. I have something to talk about. David cut me off and led me to the break room. With the same casualness as if handing over junk mail from a shop, David handed me the divorce papers. I was stunned, staring blankly at the filled-out divorce application. David then took a ballpoint pen out of his suit pocket with a smirk. "What's wrong? Need a pen? Wait a minute. Divorce? What do you mean?" With a condescending attitude, David took out a cigarette from his chest pocket and lit it. "What are you? Ever since you started working at this hotel, you've become utterly uninteresting. Dull, boring. Just plain boring. You are boring." Boring? What does he mean by boring? As I struggled to find words, David sat down on a nearby pipe chair, looking up at me. I noticed a luxurious watch peeking from under his suit sleeve, one I had never seen before. Noticing my gaze, David stroked the watch band and looked at the calendar on the wall. "I'm selling the hotel." I couldn't believe my ears. Selling our ancestral classic hotel? David stated that with Nancy, the hotel manager, unable to return to work, the hotel's management would either collapse or place a tremendous burden on David as the owner. The most efficient solution, he explained, was to sell the hotel to a large hotel group, becoming part of their umbrella and handing over the management. I've already started talks with the hotel group. Eventually, I'll earn income without having to lift a finger in the hotel business. Cool, huh? Wait a minute. At least let's talk about the hotel after Nancy's health improves, and then, this divorce thing. That's what I thought. Why should someone as great as me be married to such a plain woman? The more I thought about it, the more irritated I got. David, not listening to me at all, forced a pen into my hand and pushed me in front of the desk. "Sign it now," he whispered into my ear, pointing at the divorce application on the desk. Chills ran down my spine, and I impulsively pushed David away. He looked at me with a scornful smile. "I'll take the hotel's revenue and the staff with me." Wait, let's be rational. At least let's wait until Nancy recovers, finish discussing the hotel, and then talk about us? Trying to stall for time? Fine, I'll leave for today. The decision about this hotel is mine to make. David tapped the divorce application on the desk a few times as if to say, "Sign it. And tell Mom, if she can't work, she should stay somewhere else. This hotel isn't a nursing home for the elderly." After David left the office, I stood there, dumbfounded. The situation was so shocking that I couldn't tell if it was a dream or reality. The door opened. I tensed, thinking David had returned, but it was Nancy. She had been bedridden in her pajamas until this morning, but now stood in her usual plain work dress. Nancy hugged me as I stood there in shock. "I'm sorry." She apologized softly. "Now, it's my turn." A sophisticated, mischievous smile I had never seen before spread before me. Being gently patted on the head by Nancy, slightly shorter than me, brought a strange feeling. Eventually, Nancy patted my back lightly. "I'm truly sorry." She apologized again. "The truth is, my being ill was a lie." "What? A lie? Why would you do that?" "I apologize for testing you like this. But listen, Sarah." Nancy, ensuring no one else was listening, began to explain everything in a low voice. It turns out that Nancy had noticed David's suspicious behavior for months. She had heard that his reasons for going out were to meet with executives of a rival hotel group. She didn't know what it meant for him to meet with executives of a rival company, but she wanted to test him by pretending to be sick and bedridden. Nancy apologized repeatedly for putting such a burden on me as David abandoned his duties as the owner, pushing most of the work onto me. But now, finally, I see what truly needs to be protected. I'll make sure David takes responsibility for betraying us, both as a hotel successor and as a family member. After that, David didn't return home, and days went by without incident. A month passed, and the snow around the hotel began to melt. While cleaning the entrance, which had become my daily routine,
I casually glanced towards the stream, wondering if I might see that rare kingfisher again. Every time I hear an unfamiliar bird call in the distance, I feel as if my heart is being cleansed. Perhaps this is a privilege of living in such a place. The anxiety I felt initially had vanished, and I had grown to love this hotel. I loved the hotel staff, Nancy as the hotel manager, and the scenery visible from here, everything. I gripped the broom I was holding tightly. Then I saw a familiar car climbing the hill. David got out of the car, which he had parked recklessly, and the first thing he said was,
"Hey! What's the meaning of this?"
I suggested calmly.
"Let's discuss it in the office."
I guided him there. Even he, mindful of the few guests inside the hotel, refrained from yelling impulsively. However, as soon as he entered the office, he started questioning me loudly.
"Hey, the deal to sell the hotel is off. What did you do?"
Nancy thoroughly investigated which company you were negotiating the sale with. So, I took the initiative to consider the future direction of our hotel. He looked puzzled. I laid out several documents from the office shelf onto the table. The neatly compiled documents detailed our hotel's financial status and specific business plans. Also, there were thick bundles of documents for presenting the benefits of partnering with the large hotel chain he had approached for sale. Not as a sale, but a partnership. He skimmed through one of the documents labeled contract.
"Wait, you managed to form a partnership with that major company? That's a huge benefit for our hotel."
Sarah is a very skilled negotiator. Nancy was leaning against the office wall, listening. David reread the contract and documents, biting his lip. Nancy and I had gone to the large hotel company he intended to sell to, explained the situation, and had the sale called off. Not only that, but we also presented the strengths of our hotel and the benefits of a partnership, securing a business partnership. My skills honed from years in corporate marketing came in handy. Inspired by the kingfisher I saw near the stream, I decided to aim for a concept of a hotel surrounded by birds. This involved planning the development of the untouched, secret-like location while being mindful of the bird's ecosystem. This idea came from my perspective as a hotel manager. Some guests who stayed at our secluded hotel wore binoculars, perfect for birdwatching, as many birds reside in these remote mountains.
A garden with a water feature and feeding station for the birds. But if we just scatter food, isn't that like keeping them, like a zoo?
We'll only feed them in winter. Birds struggle to find food then. Eventually, we plan to plant fruit-bearing plants around the hotel and use fruits and insects to establish a coexistence with the birds.
But that's quite a radical idea, isn't it? We're a hotel, not a bird sanctuary.
David fell silent. Both Nancy and I were giving him cold stares. After all his complaints about the hotel's management and talks of selling it, he had the nerve to criticize our carefully considered idea.
"David, I heard you were rude to Sarah. You have no place in this hotel anymore."
After Nancy spoke to David, both David and I fell silent. The ticking of the wall clock seemed unusually loud. David said nothing, just stared at the documents for a long time, and then sat down on the floor, resting his forehead in his hands.
"What have you done? Do you know why I decided to sell? I only saw a future of hardship in continuing this dilapidated hotel. A workplace with such long hours, it's going to be tough for Sarah too. David, let's sell it now. It's not too late. If we sell to an overseas investor, this place will become a hotel for foreigners. Most of the staff could be fired right after the sale, you know?"
"What?
Really? Are you sure that's not an exaggeration?"
David looked at Nancy with a scared expression. Nancy nodded silently, affirming my point. Honestly, saying everyone would be fired after the acquisition was an exaggeration, but this kind of shock seemed necessary for David at the moment. For David, who grew up in this hotel, many of the staff were like relatives. Perhaps he also didn't want to trouble them.
"This is a classic hotel that has lasted for hundreds of years. I want it to continue for much longer."
Prompted by my words, the office door opened, and the staff entered. The small office quickly filled with waitresses, chefs, receptionists, drivers, and other hotel employees. Everyone knew about the situation. Whether David was suitable as an owner or not was unclear, but his unilateral decision to sell the hotel was unacceptable to the other employees. Some were openly angry, while others looked at him with sadness. Faced with so many intense stares, he could only hang his head in silence.
I get it. I'll try harder as an owner. Well, the divorce papers have already been filed.
What?
Wait. If we're divorced, isn't it strange for Sarah to work at the hotel?
Right, Mom? David, seemingly delighted to have found a flaw in the story, questioned with a malicious smile. Nancy then pulled a photograph from her dress pocket. In the photo, David was arm in arm with a young woman wearing flashy makeup.
You've been infatuated with a young girl, piling up debts for her. That's why you were rushing to sell the hotel and get a divorce, right? I had someone investigate.
David clutched the photo, emitting a groan, then collapsed to the floor, holding his head.
Just wait. Am I really wrong? I don't understand, it doesn't make any sense.
One of the employees said.
Let's have the outsider leave.
A few people helped David up and took him out of the office. Left alone with Nancy, we exchanged glances and sighed deeply together. It's over, isn't it?
Yes. Sarah, I'd like you to continue as the hotel manager. Is that all right?
Remembering the behavior Nancy taught me as a hotel manager, I replied quietly.
Yes, with pleasure.
A year is about to pass since then. The hotel, managed by Nancy and me, is fully booked every day. Now that my divorce with David is finalized, our relationship isn't mother-in-law and daughter-in-law anymore. In this hotel, not only am I cherished by regular customers for maintaining its classic charm, but I also constantly strive to attract new clientele and enhance customer satisfaction. David, having betrayed his family, felt uncomfortable staying locally and has set off for the city. According to mutual acquaintances, he's living a transient life doing day labor, much like a migratory bird. I sincerely hope he leads a life that's meaningful to him. While constantly devising new hotel events and plans, what I value most is creating a workplace where employees feel fulfilled and satisfied with their jobs. Nancy, who was my mother-in-law, agrees, and we support each other like a real family. Currently, I'm learning hospitality techniques for foreign tourists from our partner hotel and excitedly looking forward to the hotel's future prospects. With the snow melting, spring is fast approaching. On the other side of the mountain near the stream, low-growing wild cherry trees are about to bloom. One of our guests, who was wearing binoculars, sparked a conversation about birdwatching. When I mentioned,
I saw a kingfisher near the hotel,
the guest smiled happily and said, That's amazing. Sometimes during my break, I sit by the stream, quietly passing time, feeling the breath of nature. I imagine a beautiful black and white bird flying out from between the lush trees, crossing my field of vision, as I watch the water flow for a long time. The stream, formed by melting snow and spring water from the mountains, looks endlessly beautiful, almost eternal. I never saw the kingfisher again after that chance encounter. Can you give me a hand, please? A new waitress at the hotel entrance calls me with a puzzled look. I stand up, pat my backside lightly, and jog back to the hotel. Behind me, unbeknownst, the kingfisher flies swiftly over the stream.